Marvel's master of multiversal magic. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction, so don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 101 First Mission. Urza's last mission was to subdue a rampaging demon, so that horn must be her trophy. Urza walked into the hall and placed the horn on the ground, causing the entire guild floor to tremble. Mira Jane explained to George and Lucy at the opportune moment. If a single horn is this big, how big must a demon itself be? Probably almost as big as the guild. That's terrifying, Lucy gasped, covering her mouth in shock, while George was equally taken aback. He felt that the S-class mages of this world were probably much stronger than he had anticipated, and defeating a demon several meters tall seemed effortless for them. However, it was also possible that Urza herself was among the best of the S-class mages. I'm telling you guys, I've heard a lot of rumors along the way, saying that we fairy tale members are always causing trouble. Even if the guild master forgives you, I won't. Kana, is this how you drink? Vishada, if you want to dance, go outside, don't stand on the table. Wakaba Nabu Makeo, putting down her devil horns, Urza, hands on her hips, began to berate the guild's mages one by one. Those mages whose names were called didn't dare utter a sound. Even Natsu and Gray, who weren't afraid of the guild master and could fight at the first meeting, were now all arms around Urza, pretending to be good buddies, leaving Lucy completely dumbfounded. She really is the guild master, the queen of fairies, George thought to himself in amazement. It seems there are no wrong nicknames, only wrong names. He had been in the guild for a while and had a certain understanding of the personalities of most of the mages there. To be honest, most of the mages in fairy tale shared a similar temperament. Even if there were differences in strength, no one in the guild would submit to anyone else, and fights were commonplace. The fact that Urza was being scolded like this and didn't dare to talk back at all only showed that Urza's position in the hearts of the fairy tale mages was indeed quite extraordinary. Are you new members? After finishing her rounds, Urza happened to see the new faces, George and Lucy, and walked over. Lucy trembled upon seeing her and immediately reached out to greet her. My name is Lucy, I'm a new member, nice to meet you. My name is Urza, no need to be so polite. You can consider this your second home, we are all your brothers and sisters. Urza reached out and grabbed Lucy's shoulder, her face serious. Then, as if remembering something, her eyes suddenly lit up. So you're Lucy. I heard as soon as I arrived in town that you easily defeated the ferocious Vulcan gorilla with just one finger. Well done. Lucy was immediately dumbfounded. On the day she joined the guild, she and Natsu did fight the Vulcan gorilla while rescuing Macau, but Natsu was the main damage dealer, she was just providing support. Who spread that rumor about defeating the Vulcan gorilla with one finger? My name is George. I joined on the same day as Lucy. Nice to meet you. George also extended his paw in greeting. Urza leaned closer to examine George, then subconsciously nodded. Hello, George. I always thought Happy was an oddball, I didn't expect he had someone like him. Your color matched Laxus quite well, maybe we could consider teaming up in the future. Colors match. George was taken aback. Mira Jane chuckled, the guild master wouldn't want George to team up with Laxus. Laxus and the guild master didn't get along. Laxus was away on missions most of the time, rarely returning. If George teamed up with Laxus, he wouldn't be able to act as a troubleshooter anymore. Why? Urza looked puzzled upon hearing Mira Jane's words, but after learning about George's expertise in repair magic, she excitedly scooped him up and hugged him tightly. George, team up with me. She had always been hesitant to go all out for a fear of damaging surrounding buildings, making missions less enjoyable. With George following behind to repair, her mission efficiency would greatly improve. We'll split the reward 50-50. No need. I don't want to team up yet. George struggled to squeeze out of Urza's arms, shook his slightly bewildered head, and decisively refused the invitation. Urza's speed was too fast. At such close range, even if he could react, his body wouldn't have time to dodge. Normally, this could be considered a perk, since Urza is indeed very beautiful and has a great presence. But now, Urza is wearing a suit of sturdy armor, so being held in her arms isn't so pleasant. Luckily, His constitution is pretty good, otherwise he might have fainted from that embrace. That's such a pity. Hearing George's reply, Urza showed a regretful expression, then looked at Mira Jane and asked, "By the way, where's the guildmaster? I have something important to report to him, but I haven't seen him." "The guildmaster went to a routine meeting," Mira Jane replied. Urza frowned upon hearing this, thought for a moment, and then turned to look at Natsu and Gray behind her. The two, who had been standing head to head, immediately hugged each other like buddies again when Urza turned her head. "Natsu, Gray, I've run into some trouble during a mission and need your help. Would you like to come with me?" "What?" Urza actually asked for help? This is the first time, and it's Natsu and Gray. Hearing Urza's words, not only Natsu and Gray were surprised, but all the mages in the guild except for George and Lucy were in an uproar. Urza, with her strength, usually only took on S-rank missions on the second floor, and she always completed them alone, never needing a team. This was the first time ever. Of course, after their initial surprise, Natsu and Gray immediately agreed excitedly. Although neither wanted to team up with the other, doing a mission with Urza would definitely be a challenging experience. They couldn't miss this opportunity to hone their skills. "Go back and prepare. We'll leave tomorrow." Seeing that Natsu and Gray didn't refuse, Urza turned and, holding her demon horns, left the guild first. As soon as Urza left, the guild's mages immediately started discussing, speculating about what kind of powerful enemy Urza would face that would require Natsu and Gray's help. Various guesses arose, some even going so far as to suggest a legendary dragon. "Lucy, George, I need to ask you for a favor," Mira Jane suddenly called out to Lucy and George, who were listening to the gossip. Chapter 102 Gold Medal Support. "What's wrong, Mira Jane?" Lucy and George turned around. Mira Jane grabbed Lucy's hand and George's. "I hope you two can go with Urza and the others tomorrow." "What, me?" Lucy looked incredulous. She wasn't much of a help. George, however, had already guessed why she'd called him. Sure enough, Mira Jane patiently explained, "Lucy, Natsu and Gray will definitely be arguing behind Urza's back. You'll have to help stop them. George, your task is more important. Whether the guildmaster comes out alive after the next council meeting depends on you." "Mira Jane, that's too much?" "Okay. I'll do my best." George's lips twitched involuntarily, but under Mira Jane's gentle and expectant gaze, he agreed. Clearly, Mira Jane was worried that Urza, Natsu, and Gray teaming up might cause a major disaster and wanted him to help put out the fire with his repair magic. Having received considerable care from the guildmaster and other fairy tale mages during this time, he couldn't very well refuse. He was also curious about the trouble Urza was facing. If even an S-class mage considered it troublesome, could it be related to the Dragon Slayer crystal? In truth, before creating the super wand, he might not have agreed. Anything that an S-class mage found troublesome inevitably involved considerable danger. With his previous strength, he could easily have been injured or even killed. But with his super wand, his strength had increased significantly, and the power of many spells had increased nearly tenfold. He felt that even if he encountered danger and couldn't win, he could still escape. Seeing George agree, Lucy felt embarrassed to refuse and nodded in agreement, both worried and excited. She was worried about the dangers ahead, but excited because this was the adventure she had been hoping for since escaping her pampered life and coming to Fairy Tale. The next day, Magnolia City train station. George, carrying a small backpack, arrived at the station early and took out a magic book to read. It was called a small backpack, but on George's cat-like form, it was only about the size of a purse. However, don't underestimate this purse-sized backpack. After being expanded using the seamless stretch charm cast by the super wand, the interior space was comparable to a small 40-square-meter room. With such ample storage space, he could carry many spellbooks to read on the go, continuing his research and study of magic outside of battle. He had already mastered giant magic and light magic, and he had begun to slowly study other types of magic, those simpler yet helpful in his current combat. George, about 5 minutes later, a familiar voice interrupted his reading. It was Lucy, who had arrived as early as him. Today, Lucy was wearing a yellow tank top paired with a blue miniskirt, which particularly accentuated her figure. The swaying motion as she ran made George unable to resist taking a few more glances. Putting everything else aside, in terms of sheer audacity, Lucy was probably one of the most outrageous fairy tale female mages he had ever seen. Shortly after Lucy arrived, Natsu, Happy, and Gray also arrived, But Natsu and Gray started arguing again as soon as they met. Sorry to keep you all waiting. Just as the train was about to depart, Urza finally appeared before everyone, dragging a large cart. Why is there so much luggage? Lucy was petrified when she saw the dozens of suitcases packed full on the cart. Who would carry so much luggage on a mission? Happy muttered, Urza has OCD. She always takes all her clothes with her when she goes on a mission. Looks like she has quite a few magical weapons and armor. George wasn't concerned about Urza's luggage, but rather her magical weapons and armor. After learning about the characteristics of the dress-up magic in the library, he knew that the dress-up magic space wasn't just for magical weapons. Other everyday items could also be stored there. However, most dress-up mages had limited strength, and their space was already quite good if it could hold 1 or 2 magical weapons. They simply couldn't fit anything else. But for an S-rank mage like Urza, the space must be quite large. Urza didn't put her luggage into her special storage, which meant she must have a lot of magical weapons and armor there. Of course, S-rank mages get very high rewards for their missions, so she shouldn't be short of money. Urza, if you don't mind, you can put your luggage in my magical item for now. After thinking for a moment, he put down his backpack and offered. He had 3 purposes for this mission. First, to repay the resources and help he had received from the guild. Second, to see if he could find out anything about the Dragon Slayer crystal. Third, to cultivate good relationships with the strongest mages in the guild, in case he needed their help in the future. For example, if he got information about the Dragon Slayer crystal but the enemy was very powerful, he could ask these mages in the guild who owed him favors for help, so he wouldn't have to fight alone. George, you actually have a rare special magic item. Thank you. Seeing George stuff a large spellbook into his small backpack, Urza's eyes lit up immediately. She guessed that George's backpack contained a rare special magic item and nodded happily. George placed the small backpack on the ground and opened it. He activated his magnetic power, and a wand with an iron ring inside flew out and landed in his hand. Fast movement, he activated the teleportation charm, and as he waved the wand, the suitcases automatically lined up and entered the small backpack on the ground. Wow, Urza and the others were surprised by what they saw. George's magic wasn't particularly powerful, but it looked like art and was very unique. Whether it was repairing items, cleaning, or making the suitcases line up and enter the backpack like today, it was all quite impressive. I'm not very good at combat, but I know some support magic. I hope it can help you. George humbly put the backpack back on his back. He didn't plan to fight personally this time unless absolutely necessary. After all, the enemies this time weren't the low-level mages he had encountered before, and it was still somewhat dangerous. He could use his harpy magic to provide support. Being a top-notch support wouldn't be bad. You don't need to fight. Just leave all the enemies to me. Natsu, Gray, and Lucy. Urza patted her chest, making the armor clang. Lucy's expression was slightly bitter. She really wanted to tell Urza that she wasn't actually that strong and couldn't defeat a Vulcan with just one finger. Chapter 103 Top Tier Staff Body. With everyone present, Urza's luggage was stored in George's backpack, so there was no need to find staff to store it. The 4 of them and their 2 cats boarded the train together. Gray and Natsu sat in one row, with Happy in the middle, while Lucy and Urza sat in another row, with George in the middle. However, as soon as the train started moving, Natsu's condition immediately changed. Gone was the energetic person he had been earlier. His face was contorted in pain, as if he were carsick. What's wrong with him? George asked, somewhat surprised. He could understand car and seasickness, but train sickness was something he had never heard of before. Especially with Natsu's abnormal physical condition, it was even less likely that this would happen. Normal people don't get train sickness. Natsu gets sick of all kinds of transportation. He'll be like this with any mode of transport. You'll get used to it. Happy pulled a small dried fish from his bag and explained while chewing it. As Natsu's partner, he was already used to it. By the way, George, do you want one? He then pulled out one and offered it to George, but George politely declined. His body was that of a cat, but his soul was human. He wasn't as fond of dried fish as Happy. Getting dizzy on all modes of transportation? This doesn't make sense. Not understanding what was happening, he still drew his wand and cast a levitation spell on Natsu. Yugam, Leviosa. Under the effect of the levitation spell, Natsu slowly floated up from his seat, neither touching the seat nor the bottom of the vehicle, just hovering in the middle. In this state, Natsu immediately regained his senses. exhaling a mouthful of flame. Haha, I'm back to normal, thank you, George. Good that it worked, George nodded. His magic power was limitless, amplified by his super wand. A single levitation spell could maintain his levitation for half an hour without a problem. A few more uses would allow Natsu to float to his destination. Natsu was one of the main combat forces for this mission, so he naturally needed to ensure he was always in good condition. Otherwise, what if they encountered an enemy attack? He couldn't very well have him take the hits. Urza, we've already set off, and you still haven't told us what's going on, Gray asked Urza, speaking up. They still didn't know what trouble Urza was talking about, or who their enemy was. Urza nodded and began to explain. Just a few days ago, she had completed a mission and was returning to the guild when she overheard a conversation between several mages from the Black Iron Forest Guild at a tavern in Onibus. The conversation was about how the Black Iron Forest had found the legendary cursed flute and wanted to unseal it to use its powerful curse-killing abilities for a grand plan. The cursed flute. George's eyes lit up after hearing Urza's explanation. He had seen information about the cursed flute in a book about magical items in the library. Legend had it that the cursed flute was originally a magical item used to cast curse-killing spells, but after being modified by the most evil black mage in legend, Zareth, it evolved into a magical flute. Anyone who hears the sound of the cursed flute will immediately be cursed to death by death magic. Its attack range is vast. He wasn't concerned with the cursed flute's curse power. It was indeed powerful, but with his strength, it was unlikely he could possess it. And killing a whole group with a single blow would only invite the wrath of the entire kingdom's mages. The main concern was that the book not only described the cursed flute but also included a picture of it, a thick wooden flute with a skull-shaped head. In other words, with a little polishing, it would make an excellent wand. He always felt his super wand's shaft was unworthy of its core. If he used a section of this cursed flute as the shaft, he felt the wand's effect would be several times greater, especially against cursed black magic like the Divine Edge Curse. George, do you know about the cursed flute? Urza asked, noticing the change in George's expression. George nodded, not hiding anything. I saw it in a book about magical items in the library. The cursed flute lullaby is, if it's such a dangerous thing, then we can't just leave it alone. After listening to George's explanation, Urza's face turned serious. The Black Iron Forest is a guild of dark mages. The mages there take on illegal missions like assassinations, and not many of them are kind-hearted. What they're trying to do with the cursed flute is definitely not good. It could easily kill many people. I didn't realize it before, otherwise I would have performed a blood sacrifice on those Black Iron Forest mages on the spot and forced them to tell me what they wanted to do with the cursed flute. So what should we do now? Lucy asked somewhat fearfully. She felt that this mission seemed very dangerous and was already regretting coming. Let's go straight to the Black Iron Forest Guild headquarters. We'll storm their headquarters, defeat all their mages, and take the cursed flute, Urza stated her simple and brutal plan. She had originally planned to go directly to the Black Iron Forest, but felt it was too risky to take on an entire guild alone. Her main concern was that someone might secretly transfer the cursed flute while she was fighting, so she decided to go back and find Natsu and Gray first. This looks interesting. Gray showed no fear, while Natsu was practically spitting fire with excitement. Take them all down, that's awesome, I want to go home. Sweat poured down Lucy's face. A few people going to take on an entire guild, especially a dark magic guild known for its assassinations, it was terrifying. George, on the other hand, wasn't too bothered. He believed that Urza, as an S-class mage, wouldn't act recklessly. If she dared to come, it meant she had a certain level of confidence. Moreover, in Urza's plan, she, Natsu, and Gray were enough to take on the Black Iron Forest. Now with Lucy and him added, their chances of success should be even greater. He wouldn't comment on Lucy yet, at least he himself wasn't just a support character. In a truly crucial moment, his magic and psychic abilities were not to be underestimated. As the train traveled towards Onibus, where the Black Iron Forest was located, Makarov, who was holding a routine meeting of the Guildmasters Alliance in Probus City, also received a magical letter from Mira Jane. Guildmaster Makarov, Miss Mira Jane has written to you. A blue magical messenger bird delivered the letter to Makarov, who was boasting to other guildmasters about his guild's mage skills. Makarov channeled magic into the envelope, and a small magic circle slowly appeared on it. Chapter 104 The Cat Wants to Drive. Within the magic circle, Mira Jane's phantom, created using a memory spell, rose up. Guildmaster, thank you for attending the meeting. Look, this is our guild's signature beauty. Isn't she gorgeous? Makarov pointed at Mira Jane's phantom in the magic circle, proudly showing off to the other guildmasters, who nodded in agreement. Clearly, the gentle and beautiful Mira Jane was indeed stunning. However, Mira Jane's next words nearly made Makarov fall to the ground in shock. While you were away, the guild accomplished something truly remarkable. Can you believe it? Urza, Natsu, and Gray formed a team. I think this is the strongest team combination in Fairy Tail right now. Just moments ago, the four-headed hound guildmaster had reminded him that the council was worried the Fairy Tail mages might one day destroy a city, urging him to instruct the mages below to be extra careful. Now, however, he might be facing that very crisis. Urza, Natsu, and Gray, it wouldn't be too difficult for this trio to destroy a city. Fortunately, Mira Jane's next words finally put his mind at ease. George's restoration magic has improved a lot recently. He can now instantly restore an entire hall, so I had him accompany me. I felt I should inform you of this, hence this letter. After Mira Jane finished speaking, the magic circle disappeared, and Makarov silently prayed, George, now it's all up to you, Guildmaster Makarov. Your fairy tale has mages who can perform restoration magic? How come I've never heard of such magic? One of the guildmasters asked curiously. Makarov immediately puffed out his chest. Our fairy tale is full of talented people. We have all kinds of magic. This George came because of his reputation. With George, I won't have to listen to those people in the council nagging anymore. That might not be restoration magic. Perhaps it's the lost magic, the Arc of Time. Another bearded old guildmaster speculated. The Arc of Time, a lost art of time magic, could revert a state of things to the past or push them into the future, repairing or aging damaged objects, buildings, or anything that had happened before, as if time itself were turning. However, it was ineffective against living beings other than plants. 3 hours later, the train stopped at Onaba Station. Stop with a levitation charm. After releasing Natsu with a levitation charm, George and the others disembarked. Urza, do you know the exact location of the Black Iron Forest Guild? No, since they were expelled from the Guild Alliance 6 years ago and labeled a Dark Guild, their headquarters moved from its original location. It's uncertain whether they're still in Onibus. Urza shook her head. Lucy and Happy simultaneously remarked, finding them is like looking for a needle in a haystack. It's alright. As long as we capture a Black Iron Forest mage, beat him half to death, and force him to reveal their guild's location, Urza's method remained simple and brutal. Gray couldn't help but rub his forehead. Finding a few mages in a city doesn't seem like such an easy task. Urza, do you know the names of those Black Iron Forest mages? At that moment, George suddenly spoke up. I know tracking magic. Just tell me their name, and I can track their location. He didn't want to waste time on meaningless things like searching, so he decided to lend a hand. Not bad, George. Urza pulled George into a tight hug. So hard. George felt like his head had been hit again. He decided he must stay away from Urza from now on. This woman's armor was too hard. He still preferred the feeling of being held in Mira Jane's arms. I don't know the names of those Dark Iron Forest mages, but I do know there's a very famous mage in Dark Iron Forest named Eriger, Urza introduced. Eriger, the guild master of Dark Iron Forest, and also the strongest ace mage in Dark Iron Forest. He has never failed an assassination mission, and is known as the Grim Reaper Eriger. Good to know his name. George pulled out his wand from his backpack and began to cast a spell. Eriger, direction manifestation. A golden arrow appeared in front of George, pointing not to the city, but to the outskirts. George, you know so many spells. Lucy couldn't help but feel a little envious when she saw the golden arrow appear. George smiled. I don't have your strength to defeat a Vulcan ape with one finger. I can only help with small things. I told you it's a rumor. A rumor. Lucy's face immediately turned red. According to the arrow, the other party is outside the city, and may not even be outside Onaba City, so I suggest renting a magical car for safety, Gray suggested at this moment. If the Black Iron Forest were somewhere in the forest outside the city, they might find it in an hour or two. But if it had moved to another city, it might take them days. The key issue is that the directions were directed to Eriger, and it was uncertain whether he was even in the guild. I agree, George nodded. Compared to the simple-minded Natsu and the obviously abnormal Urza, Gray, despite his fetish for nudity, at least had some intelligence. I disagree. I don't want to ride. Natsu immediately raised his hand in objection, but Urza punched him to the ground. Objection overruled. I'll go rent a car. You wait for me outside the station. Soon, Urza arrived outside the station in a small green car. George looked at the green car, a hint of curiosity on his face. Is this a magic car? This was a magical world. Basically, most things were related to magic, even guns and cannons were powered by magic. Therefore, the cars in this world were magic cars powered by magic, not electricity or gasoline. The magical car's structure wasn't complicated. The back had seats like a normal car, while the front had a driver's seat like a horse-drawn carriage. Besides the joystick, accelerator, and brake, the driver's seat only had a bracelet that connected to the user's magical energy input. Get in quickly. I don't know what Aragorn is going to do with the cursed flute, but it's definitely not good news. We need to find him quickly. Urza waved to the group. But George, after a moment's thought, shook his head. Urza, I think it's better if I drive the magical car. You can't. This magical car consumes a lot of magical energy. Only my magical energy can sustain it for a long time. Urza paused for a moment, then immediately waved her hand. Chapter 105 The Rampage of the Big Cat. However, George didn't give up. Urza, it's precisely because you're strongest here that you need to conserve your magic power. Otherwise, once you find the Iron Forest Guild, most of your magic power will be used up, and that will be really troublesome. Don't worry, even without magic power, I'll fight to the end with my stick, especially with Natsu and Gray here, Urza said firmly. Natsu, on the other hand, breathed fire into the sky, his face full of excitement. Ha ha ha, leave it to me, the strongest mage of fairy tale. I'll beat them all down. I'm the strongest mage of fairy tale. Gray casually lifted his jacket, revealing his 8-pack abs. What did you say, you boring pervert? Stinky flame, how about a fight here? Fight it out. Let's settle this here today, I said. You two better behave yourselves. As partners, you should love each other. How can you talk like that? Urza removed the connection device from her wrist, got out of the car, and punched both of them to the ground. George seized the opportunity to fly to the driver's seat and said, actually, although my strength is limited, my magic recovery rate is very fast. If there really is a problem, you can switch to me then. He has wizard blood, so the concept of running out of magic is non-existent for him. But George, even if you can input magic, you still can't drive it, right? Your hands can't reach the control stick or the brake. At this moment, Lucy quietly raised her hand. George is a cat that is only about 30 centimeters long. Even if he can wear the bracelet and output magic, he simply cannot operate the magic car. Unless George only outputs magic and someone else drives the magic car. This is not a big problem. George obviously wanted to experience the fun of driving a magic car himself. A magic circle flashed above his head, and his cat body immediately grew rapidly, transforming into a golden cat comparable in size to a tiger in the blink of an eye. He walked to the driver's seat of the magic car, put on the connected bracelet on his cat wrist, placed his 2 front paws on the steering wheel, and his hind paws could just reach the accelerator and brake. Happy, we're both cats, but the difference is huge, Lucy muttered to herself, looking at George after his transformation, and Happy perched on Natsu's shoulder eating fish. Happy, obviously hearing her mutter, glanced at Urza and then at Lucy, delivering a precise retort. Lucy, we're both female mages, but the difference is huge. Lucy felt a sharp pang of hurt. Let's go. After Urza, Natsu, Gray, Happy, and Lucy all squeezed into the car, George floored the accelerator, and the magic car shot off, quickly becoming just a green dot. I never thought I could enjoy the thrill of racing in another world. Twisting the steering wheel, he executed a smooth drift around the sharp bend, overtaking a not-so-slow carriage, and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. The coachman of the carriage he had overtaken rubbed his eyes in bewilderment. I saw it, a huge cat speeding. George, can your magic handle driving that fast? Urza poked her head out from the back of the carriage, worried. George wagged his tail, indicating that it was no problem. Speeding was exhilarating, and continuous speeding was even more exhilarating. Half an hour later, near the Nuka station, a squad of armored soldiers stopped the oncoming George in stunned silence. Cat, stop, for inspection. We are mages from Fairy Tale. What's the problem? Urza immediately got off the carriage and identified herself. After verifying their magical tattoos, the squad leader explained, excuse me, Mages from the Dark Iron Forest Guild hijacked a train at this station, and we are conducting a routine search." The magic carriage started again, and the group continued to follow the arrows while discussing the Dark Iron Forest's intentions in hijacking the train. Trains can only travel along fixed tracks, but they can carry more people and are much faster than ordinary carriages. Therefore, they unanimously believe that the other party was likely carrying the cursed flute to a city where the train stopped. Sure enough, the direction the down arrow pointed to was consistently in the direction the tracks extended, confirming their guess. Passing through Gunukus City and Ashobana City, they soon approached Krobus City. Found it, not far from Krobus City, they found the abandoned train on the tracks. Unfortunately, the train was empty. There was no sign of the Black Iron Forest mages. "It seems their target is Krobus City," Urza frowned. At this moment, George suddenly remembered something and said with a serious expression, "If I remember correctly, the place where the Guildmaster and the others hold their regular meeting seems to be in Krobus City." Yesterday, when he asked Mira Jane about the Guildmaster's whereabouts, Mira Jane mentioned the location of this year's regular meeting. "George, do you mean their target is our Guildmaster?" Lucy's eyes widened immediately. A chill ran down Gray's spine. "I'm afraid it's not just our Guildmaster, but all the Guildmasters. Imagine what would happen if all the Guildmasters of legitimate mage guilds were simultaneously cursed to death by the cursed flute. The wheels are still hot, the train only stopped recently. George, please continue using your tracking magic. We must stop them before they find their Guildmaster." Urza touched the train wheels, her face serious as she pleaded with George. "I'm also a member of Fairy Tale. It's my duty." George activated his tracking spell again, driving the magic car after the Black Iron Forest mages. Finally, on the streets of Krobus City, they blocked Aragorn and his group of Black Iron Forest mages. "Aragorn, hand over the cursed flute." "Don't go any further. Who are you people?" Aragorn, shirtless, his hands bandaged, wielding a scythe, narrowed his eyes as he looked at the magic car blocking his way and the mages emerging from it. He could have used the cursed flute to kill all the guild leaders inside the villa on the north side of the city after crossing the city, but he was stopped. The key question was, how did they know his plan? How did they know he had the cursed flute? Fairy Tale mage Urza, Natsu, Gray, Lucy, Happy, George. After instinctively announcing his name, George felt a surge of excitement. However, reason quickly suppressed this feeling. As a mage, he felt it was best not to be too impulsive. Shouting about friendship, bonds, and comrades while rushing forward wasn't really his style. A separate, unrelated news item, reporting on the results, over 1,600 first-day subscriptions. Thank you all for your support. To be honest, it exceeded my expectations. I thought 2,000 readers would be enough, but 1,500 first-day subscriptions would be very satisfying. So, as promised, 5 chapters today. Let's get to it. Chapter 106 Armor of the Wind God. Regaining his normal size and spreading his wings, George flew into the air and shouted with a megaphone spell before Aragorn could speak, "We are Fairy Tale mages. Everyone listen up. These are mages from the Dark Iron Forest Guild. They're going to use the dark magical artifact, the cursed flute, to curse and kill the guild leaders who are meeting nearby. It's extremely dangerous here. Everyone, please leave immediately and notify the army and the guild leaders who are meeting nearby to come and help." The immediate priority wasn't to start a fight, but to evacuate the crowd to prevent a battle from affecting ordinary people, and to have the nearby police report the situation. He believed that with the strength of the guild leaders, unless they were caught off guard by a sneak attack, they shouldn't be cursed to death by a magical artifact. Most of the guild leaders were S-rank mages, experienced, and proficient in various spells. He even suspected that such a large-scale curse might not be very effective, even if it was a sneak attack. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been sealed away so easily back then. A deafening roar echoed through the city, instantly terrifying the onlookers who had been watching the spectacle. Within seconds, the streets were cleared. Dark mages were terrifying beings in the eyes of ordinary people. Many died each year in battles involving them, a fact frequently reported in magic magazines. "You're asking for death?" Seeing this, Aragorn swung his scythe, unleashing a sharp wind blade that slashed directly at George in midair. The cat's shout had already alerted the enemy, and he couldn't let it continue. George, seeing the green wind blade approaching, tried to dodge, but Urza had already leaped in front of him, easily shattering the blade with a single sword strike. "A bunch of flies. How dare they ruin my plans? You hold them off." I'm going to curse those guild leaders." Knowing that Urza, the Fairy Queen, was not to be trifled with, Aragorn wasn't foolish and immediately ordered the guild's 100 mages to intercept them. He himself, wielding the cursed flute, took to the wind, intending to reach the villa in the north of the city first and unleash the curse before the guild leaders could react. Kill! Hearing Aragorn's command, the mages went berserk, unleashing their magic and attacking Urza and the others, making escape impossible for them. Not good. Urza and the others were surprised to see Aragorn so cowardly, turning to flee without a fight. Fortunately, George made his move at that moment. "Since you've turned your back on me, I won't be polite." George spread his wings and swiftly flew towards Aragorn, brandishing his wand, Expelliarmus. A red magical beam struck Aragorn precisely, forcibly knocking the cursed flute from his hands. Before he could grab them, George cast another spell. "Fly here, fly there." The fallen cursed flute quickly flew back into George's hand. "Damn it, I was careless." Aragorn retrieved his scythe, his eyes bulging with rage. He never expected to be tricked by a cat. "Damn cat, give me back the cursed flute." He unleashed several wind blades, quickly pursuing George. George, using his size advantage, nimbly dodged all the wind blades, refusing to engage. His magic had only hit Aragorn because the latter was completely unprepared and careless. Otherwise, given the speed of Aragorn's wind magic, he could easily have evaded the attack. Unless he used the Divine Shield spell. But the Divine Shield spell was his trump card. If he couldn't kill him in one go, the opponent would be wary. Revealing his trump card without knowing the opponent's information was unwise. The Divine Shield spell's attack was unpredictable, difficult to detect and dodge, but it wasn't entirely without flaws. Enemies could still dodge it in advance if they paid attention to the direction of his wand's swing. Only when he can cast the Divine Strike without a staff and without a sound can he truly be said to have no weaknesses. "Good job, George. Get behind me, I'll handle him." Urza was overjoyed to see George snatch the cursed flute. She transformed her magic sword into a magic spear and swept away more than a dozen mages, blocking her path with a single sweep. George didn't hold back either. With Urza, an S-rank mage, there, he could let her handle things while he stayed behind, providing support and launching surprise attacks. Dizzy, a blue magic beam shot towards Aragorn, forcing him to slow down and dodge. He turned and accelerated, hiding behind Urza, standing with Lucy and Happy. "Alright, today I'll personally meet the Fairy Queen." Having dodged the attack and found Urza blocking George's way, Aragorn knew that without eliminating Urza, he wouldn't be able to reclaim the cursed flute, and finally unleashed his true power. As the guild master of the Black Iron Forest and a fellow S-rank mage, he wasn't truly afraid of Urza. Storm Wave, a purple magic circle rose in Aragorn's right hand, and a small tornado instantly formed, sweeping towards Urza. A wind mage? Facing the approaching tornado, Urza showed no panic. She activated her night magic, and a red magic circle instantly lit up her body. Armor of the Wind God, her original armor and spear vanished instantly, followed by her body being enveloped in magic power, transforming her appearance in the blink of an eye. Urza now wore a pair of small wings, her long, flowing hair was tied up, her armor had changed into a tribal robe embroidered with wind and cloud patterns, and her spear had transformed into a cloud-shaped longsword. Is this Urza's transformation night magic? It's certainly different from ordinary transformation magic. George, hiding behind, showed a hint of interest after witnessing the entire transformation process. Ordinary transformation magic involves summoning a pre-prepared magical weapon from a self-created space and then engaging in close combat. For George, this seemed no different from simply taking out a prepared weapon from a backpack expanded with a seamless stretch charm, perhaps just a tiny bit faster. But with his magnetic control, he wouldn't be much slower. However, Urza's magic was different. Besides magical weapons, she could also instantly summon magical armor, and crucially, the armor was instantly donned, even changing her hairstyle. If you were to take the armor out of his backpack and then take off his clothes to put it on, it would take a minute or two, especially since armor is generally quite difficult to put on. Chapter 107 Celestial Magic. As a wizard, George doesn't need much melee combat, but he still needs to be well protected. In any world, having a set of high defense armor, which can be summoned at any time in case of danger, is very helpful. He also considered that creating space himself and using the unseen stretch charm are somewhat different, each with its own advantages and disadvantages. The unseen stretch charm expands the space significantly, even to the size of a city, enough to hold not only things but also animals and people. However, the medium used for expansion must be carried at all times. If lost, the space is lost as well. If the space becomes too large in the future, some things might not be as convenient to retrieve as they are now. Even with a summoning charm, it takes a while to fly to the entrance of a large space. Another point is that while the unseen stretch charm can expand space, there needs to be a certain amount of space first. Trying to create a storage ring with a solid ring is impossible. Otherwise, Newt wouldn't need to carry boxes around, he could just use rings and bracelets, avoiding customs checks. Even if you were to cut a hole in the ring, that's not very practical. The unseen stretch charm expands an existing space. The larger the space, the easier it is to expand, and the smaller the space, the more difficult it is, as a small entrance makes entry and exit inconvenient. The Disguise Night spell, however, has the drawback that the size of the space depends entirely on the user's magical power. Even for an S-class mage like Urza, the space isn't enough, and for most mages, it's only enough for 1 or 2 weapons. It also can't store living beings, only inanimate items. But its advantages are obvious. It can't be taken by others, and the contents can be summoned and used at any time. In the Harry Potter world, it wouldn't be a problem for the Ministry of Magic to discover and prosecute. After all, in the Harry Potter world, the unseen stretch charm isn't allowed for private use. Looks like I'll have to find time to learn this spell from Urza. I wonder if she'd be willing to teach me. Ordinary disguise spells can be learned from spellbooks in the library, but Urza's Disguise Night spell doesn't have any such spellbooks. So cute. Lucy's eyes lit up when she saw Urza in a dress with small wings on her head. Urza had always struck her as a cool and straightforward girl with a leader's presence. The contrast of her suddenly wearing such adorable clothes was incredibly endearing. It's Urza's Wind God armor and Wind God sword. Erger is doomed, Happy exclaimed, hands on her hips, a look of schadenfreude on her face. What are the Wind God armor and Wind God sword? Lucy asked, voicing George's question. Although Happy wasn't particularly strong, she had grown up in the guild and knew the magic of every mage. The Wind God armor is a set of armor Urza prepared specifically to counter wind-type magic users. Wind magic hitting her is at least halved in power, and the Wind God sword she wields is an incredibly powerful wind magic sword. Open. Urza, now in her new outfit, swung her sword fiercely at the oncoming tornado. A burst of violent wind magic erupted from the sword, instantly cleaving the small tornado in two. After unleashing a tornado with her sword, Urza didn't stop. In a flash, she leaped in front of Erger and began a frenzied close-quarters attack. Erger hurriedly used his scythe to defend. But his melee skills were clearly inferior to Urza's, and he was directly suppressed from the air to the ground. Every time he tried to take flight to utilize his aerial advantage, he was mercilessly pushed back down. Everyone's working so hard, I can't fall behind. Seeing Urza suppressing Erger, and Natsu and Grey holding off most of the mages of the Black Iron Forest, George retrieved the cursed flute, and Lucy gained confidence. She drew a golden key and chanted, "Open, Cancer Gate." Caesar, a blue magic circle rose, and a trendy man wielding clippers and sporting crab claws on his back emerged from it. Celestial Spirit Magic, pass. George was only slightly curious about the celestial spirit magic Lucy displayed. He had no intention of learning it, at least not for the time being. Celestial spirit magic isn't weak. If the summoned celestial spirit is powerful enough, it can even lead to an easy victory. However, he has a principle in learning magic. He must prioritize learning spells that are effective in all worlds. Celestial spirit magic, which summons celestial spirits to fight, is only useful in this world and completely useless in others. Marvel and Harry Potter don't have celestial spirit keys to collect, nor does a celestial spirit realm exist. Of course, this doesn't mean there's no place to learn this kind of magic. On the contrary, celestial spirit magic is very instructive, summoning creatures from another world to assist in battle through a master-servant contract. If the essence of this magic is thoroughly understood, it will definitely be very useful in the future. Unfortunately, with his current level of magic, it's more appropriate for him to learn some survival spells first. He can study those later when he becomes a true magical master. Caesar, take care of them. Seeing several Black Iron Forest mages bypass Natsu and Grey, intending to snatch back the cursed flute, Lucy waved her hand, issuing an attack command to the summoned Cancer Celestial Spirit. Shrimp, the Cancer Celestial Spirit shouted his catchphrase, charging towards the Black Iron Forest mages. He was incredibly fast. In just a few rounds, he used his two sharp scissors to cut through the mages' magical weapons, even giving them a Kappa-like haircut. Utter trash, seeing his subordinates being defeated one after another, and his strongest defensive magic, the Storm Cloak, being shattered by Urza's Wind God sword, Aragorn knew that if he didn't go all out, his plans for the day would be ruined. However, he didn't notice that George, seeing his Storm Cloak destroyed by Urza, had already secretly circled behind him. Storm Smash, a burst of wind blades instantly repelled Urza, and Aragorn quickly ascended into the air, crossing his arms as 6 purple magic circles lit up around him. Die? This is my strongest attack. Emerald Swift, half of her magic power vanished instantly, and 6 storms burst forth from the magic circle, then swirled and merged into a giant storm drill, hurtling towards Urza. This attack could bore a gaping hole even into a 100-meter-high mountain. Diamond Armor, the experienced Urza remained completely calm, activating her Kamen Rider transformation spell once more. Her Wind God armor was enveloped in extremely thick blue-white diamond armor, and her Wind God swords were replaced by 2 massive shields. Chapter 108 Cat 6's Sneak Attack. Diamond Barrier, 2 enormous shields merged, a green magical barrier completely enveloping Urza. The Storm Drill, capable of piercing mountains, was completely blocked by the diamond barrier, like an insurmountable fence, its power diminishing with each strike. How can it be so strong? Seeing that his strongest attack seemed to have no effect, Aragorn gritted his teeth, then his eyes lit up with a new idea. After this battle, he understood that he was no match for the Fairy Queen. He had given it his all, yet she seemed so composed. If the fight continued, he would surely lose. But it didn't matter. His goal wasn't to defeat Urza, but to retrieve the cursed flute and then blow the cursed sound at the Guildmaster's meeting place in the north of the city. So, he only needed to trap Urza for a moment, then he could snatch the cursed flute from that ant-like kitten and fly away to continue his plan. Magical Wind Wall, squeezing out most of his magical power, he cast a spell on Urza again. This wasn't an offensive spell, nor a defensive spell, but a spell to trap her. Using a rapidly spinning storm to create a barrier around his enemies, even mages stronger than him would be unable to break through this magic for a while. However, just as he finished casting the storm barrier, his magical energy was depleted, and his mind relaxed. A transparent blade flew swiftly from his blind spot behind him. Divine Sharpness. It was George, the 6th brother, who seized the opportunity to cast the Divine Sharpness spell from behind Aragorn. Aragorn was skilled in assassination, with extremely high vigilance and intuition. Even at this moment, he still sensed something was wrong. He wanted to activate his storm cloak for defense, but his magical energy had not yet recovered due to the continuous release of powerful attacks. He turned his head to see the source of the attack and dodge, only to find that there was no attack at all. Before he could even wonder what had happened, his head had already separated from his body. I actually died because of you, you little brat, let you be arrogant. Seeing Aragorn dead, George couldn't help but sneer in his heart. A gentleman takes revenge even after 10 years, but he wasn't a true gentleman, so he took his revenge on the spot. With Aragorn dead, the demonic wind wall dissipated, and Urza emerged, having changed back into her everyday armor. Looking at Aragorn's headless corpse on the ground, she sighed, "You were a decent opponent, but unfortunately, you chose the wrong path." Then she looked at George, her face showing appreciation. That spell was very well used. Roar of the Fire Dragon, Ice Form, Lancer. At the same time, Netso and Grey unleashed the wide-range attack spell, destroying all the Black Iron Forest mages and ending their battle. Meanwhile, a large army rushed to the scene after receiving reports from the public, and the guild leaders, who were holding their regular meeting, also arrived after hearing the news. However, upon arriving, they saw not only the fallen Black Iron Forest mages but also a large area of streets reduced to ruins by the magical battle. Although the entire city wasn't destroyed, a quarter of the southern part of the city was practically ruined, with hardly any buildings remaining intact. It's alright, with George, it can be repaired," Makarov kept panting, trying to reassure himself. If he hadn't known George could slowly repair it, he probably would have fainted from the sight. What a fine staff. You can feel the immense magical power within it just by holding it. If it were made into a wand, it would be absolutely superb. After defeating Aragorn, George carefully examined the cursed flute in his hand and pulled a small knife from his backpack. He planned to carve a piece of wood from the cursed flute to make a new one's staff before the kingdom's army and the guild masters arrived. If anyone asked, he could say it was slightly damaged in the chaotic battle. After all, he had snatched the cursed flute back from Aragorn, so it was his spoils of war. If the council insisted on taking it back, he could simply hand over the damaged cursed flute after it had been cut, which would be plausible. Just as he was about to strike, the three-eyed skull carving on the head of the cursed flute suddenly emitted an eerie purple light, and an evil voice emanated from the flute. How laughable. A bunch of useless mages, all show and no substance. Fine, I'll do it myself. I'll take the souls of all the humans in this city. Suddenly, a gigantic magic circle, capable of covering half the city, appeared above the cursed flute, and George felt the flute vanish from his hand. Then, 100-meter-tall three-eyed demon slowly emerged from the magic circle and landed before everyone. The true form of this cursed flute is actually a demon. Urza, Natsu, and the others arrived before George. George quietly sheathed his knife. He hadn't expected the flute to turn into a demon, and this demon was enormous. It looked like it wouldn't be easy to deal with. Don't be afraid of this guy. For the glory of the kingdom, archers fire. Cavalry charge. The newly arrived kingdom army, seeing the three-eyed demon appear in the city, immediately sounded the charge. A barrage of arrows rained down on the three-eyed demon, as a dense swarm of heavily armored cavalrymen charged down the street, lances in hand. Mere ordinary humans, daring to attack me? Then I'll take your souls first. The sharp arrows struck the massive three-eyed demon as if tickling it, failing to even break its defenses. The three-eyed demon turned to face the army, its mouth opening wide, unleashing a massive magical energy cannon. George estimated the magical energy emanating from that cannon to be at least 10 times stronger than Aragorn's previous ultimate attack. If it hit the charging army below, thousands would likely be instantly vaporized. Not good. Gray, Urza realized the danger as soon as she saw the kingdom's army charging. This three-eyed demon was no pushover, an ordinary army couldn't handle it. She grabbed Gray and hurled him with all her might. With Urza's immense strength, Gray shot like a rocket between the three-eyed demon and the kingdom's army. Ice form, ice shield. A massive ice shield instantly formed in Gray's hand, temporarily blocking the three-eyed demon's magical energy cannon. Fire Dragon's iron fist. At that moment, Natsu, his right hand enveloped in Dragon Slayer flames, used the amplification of the flames to leap 100 meters into the air, slamming his fist into the three-eyed demon's face. The powerful force caused the three-eyed demon to stagger, and the magical energy cannon immediately stopped. Transformation. Heavenly wheel armor. Urza, the strongest among them, was not idle either. Her armor transformed once more, becoming a beautiful new suit of armor with 4 steel wings that resembled those of an angel. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109 The True Strength of an S-Class Mage. I didn't realize Urza was so well endowed, at least a D rank, George couldn't help but exclaim, looking at Urza in her new armor. The armor's material was mostly concentrated on the wings and lower body, barely covering half of her upper body, making it look both sacred and alluring. While surprised by the cursed flute's transformation into a three-eyed demon, he wasn't panicked. He noticed that Guildmaster Makarov and the other guildmasters had already arrived. They stood there without any sign of tension, leisurely commenting on the battle between the three-eyed demon and Urza. This only meant one thing: while the three-eyed demon was powerful, it wasn't a major threat to these guildmasters. Not only were most of them S-rank, but Makarov was also a member of the 10 Wizard Saints. Crucially, they weren't unaware of the cursed flute. Just moments before, one of the guildmasters had been explaining to Lucy the story of Zareth, the creator of the cursed flute. Knowing the cursed flute's properties, their composure suggested that even if the cursed flute unleashed a curse, it wouldn't harm these guild leaders. Or perhaps they knew how to counter the cursed flute's curse. Fly, swords. Urza, clad in the heavenly wheel armor, soared through the air, dozens of magic swords swirling around her, transforming into a frenzied reaping machine as she attacked the three-eyed demon. Is this the true power of an S-Class mage? Watching Urza, along with Natsu and Gray, relentlessly overpower the three-eyed troll, riddling its massive body with holes, George was slightly shocked. It turned out that the three hadn't used their full strength when fighting the Black Iron Forest Guild. George, it's all up to you now." Just as George was marveling at the trio's strength, Makarov chuckled and approached him. George finally snapped out of his daze and looked around. He realized that the entire city was almost completely reduced to ruins in the great battle, and he couldn't help but twitch his whiskers. Even with his current super wand, repairing such a large area would probably take a considerable amount of time. "Guildmaster, are you trying to work this cat to death? Ha ha ha, what nonsense. Take your time, we can take it slow. We can work one day and rest the next, as long as we can repair this city in the end." Makarov gently massaged George's shoulders with 2 fingers, his attitude incredibly amiable. George's eyes lit up, and he immediately smiled and replied, "Since the Guildmaster has said so, then as a mage of the guild, this cat certainly has an unshirkable duty. No need for a day-to-day work. I'll try my best to repair this city as quickly as possible." Kroba City wasn't a large city, and there weren't any skyscrapers. The tallest building was only 5 stories high. If they really work diligently, it should take about 3 to 5 days. If the one's amplification effect were better, it might only take a day or 2. However, I have a favor to ask of the Guildmaster. "No problem. Since it can help you increase the repair speed, it's a small matter. Leave it to me in a bit." Makarov patted his chest and assured him. Compared to repairing the entire city, George's favor was too simple. "You guys, all of you, die." Although the 3-eyed demon's body was large and strong enough, because it was made entirely of wood, its defense was obviously not very high. Under the well-coordinated attack of Urza and her 2 companions, it quickly became unable to withstand the onslaught. So, it angrily used its innate magic as the cursed flute. Curse-killing technique. A purple magic circle rose above its head. As it took a deep breath, all the grass around the city withered, and then a huge amount of magic power instantly erupted. PFFTA sound like a fart came from the 3-eyed demon's body. For a moment, everyone fell silent. "It seems, nothing's wrong," Lucy blinked and murmured in disbelief. She had thought the 3-eyed demon's curse technique was incredibly powerful, but the result was quite unexpected. This cursed flute created by the black mage Zareth, if unleashed in a sneak attack, would be quite formidable. Within the flute's range, ordinary people and low-ranking mages would be instantly killed by having their souls drained. Slightly stronger mages might be able to resist for a while. However, if a slightly stronger mage is also proficient in silence magic and barriers, then this curse technique becomes essentially useless. "That's how it was sealed away back then," explained the Guildmaster of the 4-headed Hound Mage Guild. "So that's its weakness." George immediately understood. No wonder the Guildmasters weren't worried. Silence magic wasn't particularly difficult, and many of the Guildmasters here were probably proficient in it. Of course, even without the curse technique, the 3-eyed demon's size and its extremely destructive magical energy cannon made it difficult for ordinary people to defeat. In any case, he didn't have the strength right now. So, he can't unleash his curse technique because his body is riddled with holes, preventing him from playing his flute. After the 4-headed Hound Guildmaster's explanation, Lucy understood why the 3-eyed demon's curse technique hadn't worked. "Ah, my voice, my beautiful voice. What a joke." The 3-eyed demon, recovering from his embarrassment, immediately flew into rage and went berserk. His 3 eyes lit up simultaneously, and raging flames swept towards everyone present. At that moment, Natsu rushed in front of them, opened his mouth, and inhaled all the flames. "Not bad, all my magic power is replenished, it's time to end this." Ice shape, whirlwind disc, Gray unleashed all his magic power, creating a large, high-speed spinning ice disc, which shot towards the 3-eyed demon, slicing him in half at the waist. Change armor, black feather armor. Urza, still in midair, switched from her heavenly wheel armor to the black feather armor, which could concentrate her attacks and greatly increase destructive power. With lightning speed, she cleaved the 3-eyed demon's head in 2. Right-hand flame and left-hand flame, combine the power of both. "Take this, Fire Dragon Blaze." As the 3-eyed demon was severely injured by Urza and Gray's combined attack, Natsu leaped into the air again, unleashing his strongest attack, combining the power of the demonic flames he had just absorbed. A colossal flame slammed into the 3-eyed demon, the deafening explosion echoing through the heavens. When the dust settled, the 3-eyed demon vanished completely, transforming back into a cursed flute with a skull on its head, which fell to the ground. Chapter 110 Supreme Magic Wand. We won. We won. Seeing the 3-eyed demon vanquished, Lucy and Happy immediately hugged each other and cheered. The guild leaders also praised them highly. After all, it was a demon created by the black mage Zareth, and normally even 3 S-class mages working together wouldn't be so easy to defeat. Makarov, seeing his guild's mage being praised, was also filled with pride and satisfaction. But the next second, he heard George's resentful voice, "Guild leader, if you don't get the cursed flute, I'm going to consider switching guilds." The original Kroba city was only reduced to ruins, but now, due to Natsu's final blow, a huge hole had been blasted into the city center, making repairs significantly more difficult. "Leave it to me. Leave it to me." Hearing George's words, Makarov's body trembled, and he immediately rushed forward with lightning speed, picking up the cursed flute before the kingdom's army arrived. He then looked around, forcefully broke off the skull from the cursed flute, and quietly stuffed the remaining part into George's hand. "Keep it safe, don't let the kingdom knights see." "Thank you, guild master." George's mood immediately brightened as he happily stuffed the cursed flute into his backpack. He had originally planned to secretly carve a small section from the cursed flute to make a new wand when no one was looking. However, after this commotion, with a kingdom army and guild masters from various regions present, even though the three-eyed demon had been defeated, he couldn't very well go and carve the cursed flute anymore. So, he had just told Makarov that he was making a magical item that would greatly increase the efficiency of his healing magic and needed a portion of the cursed flute as material, hoping Makarov could help him. However, he hadn't expected Makarov to be so bold, breaking off the skull from the cursed flute and giving him the entire flute body. The larger the flute body, the better for him to make a wand. You're the head of the Kingdom Knights here, right? This is the cursed flute, completely destroyed, only this much is left. When the council members arrive, please give it to them and tell them to seal it properly. Also, tell them we'll send someone to repair the damaged city in a couple of days, that's all. Holding the skull he'd forcibly broken off, Makarov dashed towards the still-dazed Kingdom Knights, shoving the skull into the Legion commander's hand. Before they could react, he quickly returned, leading Urza and the others, disappearing from everyone's side in a flash. The council had teleportation magic. They could teleport over shortly after receiving the message. If they didn't run now, they'd be in trouble if they encountered them later. That Makarov guy, still the same as always. Watching Makarov led the way in his escape, the guild leaders of Four-Headed Hound and Blue Pegasus exchanged a smile. They had also been guild mages in Fairy Tail, Makarov's best friends. Later, due to their respective ideals and dreams, they left Fairy Tail to create their own mage guilds. However, their feelings for Fairy Tail remained. That night, in a forest on their way back to Magnolia City. "George, your magic can be used like this? That's amazing. Why don't you team up with us for missions from now on?" Natsu said to George, who was waving his wand and casting cooking magic, while gnawing on a golden brown roasted lamb leg. Because Eric Gore hijacked the train, causing it to stop running, and their rented magical car had been destroyed in the battle, the group had to walk back to Magnolia City. Fortunately, George had prepared cooking utensils and some ingredients in his backpack just in case, so they wouldn't go hungry that night. Agreed. Happy raised his paw while eating grilled fish. "Never mind, I don't plan to team up for missions for now." George handed Natsu a freshly cooked bowl of meat soup, taking the opportunity to cut off a tuft of hair from the back of his head. When it comes to wand cores, Natsu's hair is still the most useful. "George, if you want, you can team up for missions. Magic improves fastest in actual combat," Makarov suddenly said. For the guild's benefit, it was best for George to stay and act as a troubleshooter, but he felt it wasn't the best way for George's magic to improve. Between the guild's overall interests and the individual magic improvement of a mage, he prioritized the latter. Otherwise, he would have already restricted the guild mages from carrying out missions, instead of letting them do whatever they wanted under pressure from the council. "I really don't want to right now. I want to read more books and figure out my magical path. Once I've made a decision, I'll go out on missions in a team," George said, offering a flimsy excuse. Actually, it wasn't really an excuse, as he planned to read all the magic books in the library before exploring other parts of the world. But to be honest, Makarov's suggestion that he go on missions in a team was quite unexpected. As guild master, Makarov was indeed a qualified one, no wonder he was so beloved by the guild mages. 2 days later, George arrived in Kroba City again on a train that had resumed operation. Kroba City was still in ruins, but the large hole in the middle of the ruins had been filled in, presumably the work of an earth mage. All the city's residents had been temporarily relocated to military tents outside the city. You're George, the fairy tale restoration mage. Altier, the leader of the investigation team stationed in Kroba City, narrowed her eyes as she looked at the golden cat with a backpack. Ever since she learned that Fairy Tale had mentioned a maid who could restore the entire city, she had volunteered to lead this team, wanting to secretly observe whether the other party used the lost magic arc of time like herself. She just hadn't expected that this restoration mage wasn't human, but a cat. Yes, that's me. If there are no problems, I'll get to work, George nodded in reply. He needed to restore the city quickly so he could return and continue his research on magic. Since witnessing Urza, Natsu, and Gray's true strength, he felt he still had a lot of room for growth. He'd already mastered giant magic and light magic, but rapid improvement was difficult. He could only progress step by step. Therefore, he could use Feng Yang's glasses to learn other types of magic, complementing each other to enhance his overall strength. Of course, then please begin, Mr. George. Altier smiled and stepped back, watching George cast his spell. George didn't mind, taking out his new wand made from the cursed flute and Natsu's hair from his backpack, and began casting a restoration spell on the ruins in front of him. Thank you for your subscriptions and monthly tickets. 5 chapters today. Begging for more votes and subscriptions. Chapter 111 The Three Pillars of Light. As he expected, using the cursed flute as the wand's body significantly enhanced the wand's amplification of his magic. He now called it a supreme wand. The amplification of his magic by a supreme wand was nearly 20 times greater. Restored to its former glory, under the blessing of the supreme wand, the effect of the restoration spell was greatly enhanced, and the ruins before him seemed to rewind time, gradually returning to their former prosperity. Unafraid of running out of magic power, George continuously waved the supreme wand, casting one restoration spell after another. From morning till night, he cast spells for a full 10 hours, feeling somewhat dizzy, before the entire city of Kroba finally fully recovered. Alright, my work is done. Putting away his wand, George listlessly greeted Altier and the other mages of the council, then went to the train station to return to Magnolia City. Even if his magic power didn't run out, casting the same spell continuously for 10 hours was still extremely tiring. However, after the spellcasting session, he felt that his restoration spells seemed to have improved considerably. Strange, it's not the Arc of Time. Does this world really have repair magic? Altier looked puzzled as she watched George fly away. After a day of observation, she was certain that the cat George had used wasn't the Arc of Time magic, but another kind of magic she'd never seen before. If that's all, it's not a threat. This cat's magic could only repair things. It was just a support magic, nothing dangerous. Her Arc of Time, after all, did much more than just repair. It also had incredibly powerful offensive moves, even capable of stopping time. I heard Natsu is going to fight Urza one-on-one tomorrow. Maybe I should go check it out. After buying a ticket at the station and boarding the train back, George squinted and drifted into a light sleep to recover his energy. George, how are you? In the evening, he had just gotten off the train at Magnolia Station when he encountered Guildmaster Makarov, who was waiting for him there. Don't worry, President, everything has been restored to normal. Ha ha ha, well done. Let's see what reason those council guys have to cause me trouble this time. HMPH, I'll go there in a few days and make them thank me properly. If it weren't for the intervention of our fairy tale mages, who knows how far things would have gone. Makarov puffed out his chest and laughed triumphantly upon hearing George's affirmative answer. After laughing, he patted George's shoulder. George, I'll give you a big credit for this. Aren't you studying light magic? I created a very powerful light-based defensive spell. I'll teach you when I have time. Light-based defensive spell. George's eyes lit up immediately. The light spells he had seen in the library were almost all weak. If he hadn't thought that Makarov's major in light magic must have a special reason, and that light magic's effects were more sacred and had a restraining effect on dark magic, he wouldn't have planned to continue studying it. Yes, it's called the Three Pillars God. It's my strongest defensive magic, even the 10 wizard saints might not be able to break it. Makarov proudly tilted his head back. Upon hearing this, George immediately said seriously, Guildmaster, if there are any more missions like this in the future, please don't be shy with me. I love fixing things. It seems that Makarov held back quite a bit when instructing him on giant magic and light magic, not teaching him many of his ultimate techniques. Well, he hadn't been in the guild long. How could the guild master possibly teach him all his secret techniques without reservation? That would be too foolish. If he could learn more powerful magic this way in the future, he felt that even if he spent a few days repairing it, it wouldn't be a big deal. The next day, on the main street of Magnolia City, Urza and Natsu stood facing each other, surrounded by fairy tale mages and ordinary residents of Magnolia City. Natsu, go for it, Your Majesty, teach Natsu a lesson. Before the battle even started, everyone was already shouting. Fairy Tail has maintained a very good relationship with the locals in Magnolia City for many years, so the ordinary people in the city are not afraid of them at all, and actually like the guild's mages. Hearing that Natsu the Fire Dragon was going to challenge the Fairy Queen, everyone rushed over to watch the spectacle. Place your bets. Place your bets. Natsu wins to 10, Urza wins to 10, Kana, who loves to drink, seized the opportunity to open a betting pool, attracting guild mages and onlookers alike to place their bets. Most bet on the S-rank Urza to win, but a few decided to take a gamble and bet on Natsu. Natsu was very young when Urza defeated him, but his growth in recent years has been undeniable, so it wasn't impossible for him to win. Who'll win? George was also among the mages. He hadn't placed a bet, but he was still very interested in the outcome of the duel. Logically, the S-rank Urza should be stronger, but Natsu's final blow against the three-eyed demon that day had left a deep impression on him. The entire city was ripped open by that attack. Transformation, Flame Emperor armor, Urza, wielding a massive Vulcan sword, clad in red, form-fitting armor, and sporting twin ponytails, appeared before the crowd. Flame Emperor armor. This armor has fire-resistant properties, reducing the power of fire magic by half. Natsu's in trouble now. Ragnarok Alita, using wood manipulation magic, adjusted her glasses and said. The Fairy Tail members nodded in agreement. Happy even ran to Kana, wanting to switch all his bets on Natsu to Urza, only to be met with a barrage of complaints from Lucy. A mage like Urza is indeed difficult to deal with, George thought to himself. Against a mage like Urza, unless one's raw strength far surpasses hers, they're easily countered by her various magical weapons and armor. Just like now, Natsu's fire magic's power was halved. The match begins. With a shout from Guildmaster Makarov, Urza and Natsu clashed. Because Urza's armor was fire-resistant, Natsu didn't attack directly with flames. Instead, he channeled all the flames from his Dragon Slayer magic into his body to strengthen his physique for close combat. The two exchanged blows at such a rapid pace that even George couldn't keep up, and for a moment, neither could gain the upper hand. Natsu, it seems you've indeed improved a lot over the years, but time's almost up, it's time to end this. Having dodged Natsu's fierce attack once more, Urza's face showed a look of satisfaction. Her speed suddenly increased, and before Natsu could react, she appeared behind him, knocking him unconscious with a single chop to the neck. Clearly, she hadn't used her full strength in the previous battle. Now she was unleashing her true power. Chapter 112 Clues to the Dragon Slayer Crystal. I'll ask the Guildmaster if he knows where I can get Dragon Slayer crystals sometime. After watching Urza and Natsu's duel, George was somewhat moved. Although Natsu ultimately lost, the enhancement his Dragon Slayer magic provided to his physical body was still very appealing to him. Urza's strength lay in her inherent power and the enhancement from her magical armor, while Natsu's strength lay in the power and enhancement of his Dragon Slayer magic, which far surpassed that of ordinary magic. Moreover, he noticed that even the Emperor armor didn't seem to have a very good suppressive effect on the flames of Dragon Slayer magic. Normal fire magic, suppressed by the Emperor armor, could only unleash half its power, but Natsu's Dragon Slayer magic flames could unleash at least 80% of their power. Considering that other worlds don't have magical armor and weapons, he still preferred Dragon Slayer magic. Especially since Dragon Slayer magic could absorb corresponding elements to increase its strength, he thought that in the future, if faced with a nuclear attack, he could use Dragon Slayer magic to absorb the energy of the nuclear explosion and then retaliate. Restored to its original state, after repairing the damaged street with a restoration charm, George and the others returned to the guild. 3 days later, in the guild hall, George asked Guildmaster Makarov during lunch, "Guildmaster, I heard your grandson Laxus became a Dragon Slayer mage by implanting a dragon crystal. You're interested in dragon crystals?" Makarov looked slightly surprised. George didn't hide anything and nodded directly. I am indeed interested in dragon crystals. If I could get a dragon crystal, I'd like to become a dragon slayer mage too. Eh, George? Then you'd turn into Totoro. Meow. Happy, who was on the other side, couldn't help but retort after hearing George's words. This guy was even more sarcastic than Lucy. George paused, then smiled and replied, "You're not wrong. Dragon crystals, crystals made from the hearts of dragons, are extremely rare treasures. Ivan heard about Serena from me back then. He searched the entire continent of Ishgir for Laxus's body but couldn't find a dragon crystal. I remember he finally bought one from a mage from the continent of Jiltina. So I advise you not to get your hopes up too high." Makarov finished his drink and shook his head, offering his advice. Dragons were already legends. Even if they existed, they were extremely rare, let alone finding them, defeating them, and using their hearts to make dragon slayer crystals. A mage from the continent of Jiltina, George began to recall the magic book he had read about the geography of this world. This world was called Asland, and currently, 4 continents were known: the East, West, South, and North. The eastern continent of Ishgir boasts over 500 mage guilds and several kingdoms, with the kingdom of Fiori being just one of them. The western continent of Arigidasia is said to have a unified empire, but it has virtually no interaction with the eastern continent. Diplomatic relations are largely isolated, and news, books, and letters cannot circulate. However, occasionally immigrants from the western continent come to Ishgir seeking work opportunities. The mages Biska and Grammy from their guild are from the western continent. The southern continent is unknown. It's only known that such a continent exists in the south. But no mage has ever found it, and it may not even exist. The northern continent of Jiltina seems to be related to some century-old quest, but the books don't provide specific details. Who is Serena? George didn't inquire about the details of Ivan buying the dragon crystal, instead changing the subject. He knew from Mira Jane that Ivan, as Makarov's son, was expelled from the guild by Makarov for some reason, causing Laxus to harbor resentment towards his grandfather. Mentioning Ivan now would obviously evoke unpleasant memories for Makarov. Now that he had a clue about the dragon crystals, he could easily ask Ivan for details once he became stronger, or go directly to the northern continent to see if he could find any relevant clues. Serena, also known as God Serena, that guy was a mage standing at the pinnacle of the 10 wizard saints, the leader of the 4 heavenly kings of Ishgir. He fused 8 dragon crystals within his body, allowing him to use 8 types of dragon slayer magic. However, he suddenly disappeared many years ago, and we haven't heard from him in a long time, Makarov replied with a sigh. George's eyes widened upon hearing this. 8 dragon crystals. He hadn't expected that dragon crystals could not only be fused one at a time, but also so many simultaneously, which made him even more interested in them. If 8 could be fused, did that mean 18 could be fused? If he could obtain all the different elemental dragon crystals and fuse them into his body, wouldn't any elemental magic he cast be dragon slayer magic, and he could absorb all elemental magic? Just thinking about it was exciting. What's going on? I'm so sleepy. Just as George was thinking about how to obtain so many dragon crystals, he suddenly felt drowsy. His mental abilities instantly surged, dispelling the unusual sleepiness. But then he saw all the guild's mages collapse, including the S-ranked mage Urza. It's sleep magic. Has an enemy invaded the guild? George instantly spread his wings, drew his top-grade wand, and pointed it at Urza. Cure, the guild's strongest member, was Guildmaster Makarov, but he was clearly already resisting the sleep magic's effects, so George needed to first remove the spell from Urza, who was second only to him. Then he would remove it from Natsu, Gray, and the others. However, at that moment, the Guildmaster stopped him. George, don't panic. It's not an enemy, it's Mistigan. He doesn't like dealing with people, so he used sleep magic to knock everyone out. S-ranked mage Mistigan. George's heart skipped a beat. He'd overheard the gossip among the guild's mages. Urza was generally considered the strongest female mage, but opinions differed on the strongest male mage. Some said Laxus, others Mistigan, both S-class mages. Oh, and there was also Gilbert's Clive, an S-class mage widely considered Fairy Tail's strongest. Rumor had it this guy had taken on the most terrifying century-long quest in mage lore and hadn't returned to the guild for several years. Therefore, he wasn't considered a candidate for the strongest male mage. Natsu and Gray had improved significantly in recent years, and in everyone's eyes, they could barely make the cut. Chapter 113. Interested in being my cat? As soon as Makarov finished speaking, a mage wearing a mask and hood, carrying 5 wands, pushed open the door and walked into the guild. This world also has wands, but unlike George's wand, the wands in this world are more like magical tools. Each wand can cast 1 or 2 spells, and are generally used by wielding type mages. George's wand, however, cannot cast any specific spells, but it can amplify all the spells he uses, speeding up the casting process. Later, as long as he is skilled enough in magic and swings his wand fast enough, he can unleash a barrage of attacks like a machine gun. Mystigan entered the guild without a word, went straight to the 2nd floor, chose a quest, and silently left. This guy's social anxiety is definitely terminal, George remarked as everyone snapped out of their daze upon seeing Mystigan disappear through the door. Such a personality is truly rare in the Fairy Tale Guild. I'm going to read. Having already learned about the dragon crystal from the guild master and having eaten lunch, George greeted everyone and planned to continue his magic research at the library. Hey cat down there, you're quite something. Interested in becoming my cat? Just as George spread his wings, a somewhat arrogant voice suddenly came from the 2nd floor. George looked up and saw a blonde mage with a coat and a lightning bolt scar on his face, who had appeared on the 2nd floor at some point. I heard you can use healing magic, and you were even able to resist Mystigan's sleep magic just now. Very good, qualified to be my cat, Laxus, everyone exclaimed in surprise upon seeing Laxus on the 2nd floor. George then learned the identity of the mage on the 2nd floor. It was none other than the guild master's grandson, the lightning dragon slayer mage who had merged with a dragon crystal, and an S-class mage, Laxus Dreer. This guy's arrogant. Hearing Laxus's words, George twitched his beard and directly refused. No interest. He was currently focused on learning magic and improving his strength. There was no point in following Laxus. Besides, if he were to team up, he would choose Urza, Lucy, or Levi. At least the missions would be more visually appealing. You've got personality, I like that. Laxus wasn't angry at George's refusal. Instead, he showed an appreciative expression. You'll eventually have to go on missions. Instead of teaming up with this bunch of trash, you should follow me. That way, you'll improve faster. You spend all your time in the library learning magic, isn't that to improve your strength faster? He wanted to replace his grandfather as the guild master of Fairy Tale, and George, this cat who could repair magic, was very important to the guild. If he could recruit him beforehand, that would be ideal. Laxus, who are you calling trash? I'll fight you to the death. Natsu immediately flared up with anger upon hearing Laxus's words, but Laxus remained unmoved. You can't even handle someone like Urza, and you want to duel me? What did you say? Urza frowned, and a magic sword immediately appeared in her hand. Although she hadn't fought him before, she didn't think Laxus was her match. Don't be impulsive, Urza. Laxus is always like this. Don't be angry. Seeing the queen's anger and worried that the two would really fight, Gray, Levi, and the others immediately stepped forward to persuade them. Fortunately, Urza always put the bigger picture first, and in the end, she put away the magic sword. However, Laxus was still arrogant. Don't you understand? I am the strongest in the guild. What? I won't admit it. Let's settle this once and for all. Natsu stepped on the table and leaped, wanting to jump to the 2nd floor to fight Laxus, but he was slapped down by the guild master's giant hand halfway up. You're not allowed to go up to the 2nd floor unless you're S rank. Ha ha ha, you got scolded by the old man. Laxus laughed triumphantly when he saw Natsu pinned to the ground. I won't relinquish the throne of Fairy Tale's strongest. Whether it's Urza or Mystigan, I am the strongest. Alright, Laxus, you better tone it down, Makarov cursed helplessly. Laxus snorted and jumped off the 2nd floor. Before leaving, however, he left George with a message. Your colors suit me well, you'll definitely be my cat in the future. Maybe if you bring me back a dragon crystal, I might consider it. This was George's reply. If Laxus could really find a dragon crystal, or have relevant information, then teaming up with Laxus wouldn't be a bad idea. The next day, a major incident occurred in the guild. Last night, Natsu, to prove his strength, had Happy secretly go upstairs to get an S-rank mission order, then kidnapped Lucy to do an S-rank mission together. Makarov was furious and sent Gray to retrieve the two and the cat. George didn't concern himself with this matter. It wasn't something he should waste his time on. His main task now was to learn more magic and improve his strength. Meanwhile, in the Marvel Universe, Nick Fury handed the analysis report to Coulson and Black Widow, who were standing in front of him. After they finished reading it, he asked, "What do you think? Our memories have likely been tampered with." Coulson and Black Widow's answers were surprisingly consistent. As top-tier agents, trained in various specialties, they could clearly see that many details in the report didn't match their memories. Since they weren't lying, it meant their memories were flawed. This wasn't hard to understand. Leaving aside psychic superpowers, some organizations could achieve similar effects through high-tech hypnosis and brainwashing. "Any suspects?" Nick Fury asked, sitting back in his chair. Coulson thought for a moment. "Yes, that George." During the fight, only Tony's assistant, Pepper Potts, and her bodyguard, George, were present. Given George's demeanor and unidentifiable identity, he had reason to suspect that George was the one who tampered with his memories. "And you?" Nick Fury wasn't surprised and turned to Black Widow. Black Widow frowned. "I have no suspects here. Everyone I contacted is dead." Her memory should be intact before going to the Acre Gene Corporation base, as various surveillance reports and her colleagues' memories confirm this. Dr. Rice and all the guards she encountered after entering the base are now charred corpses, so they couldn't possibly be the ones who altered her memories. "You suspect that the same person or the same organization modified our memories?" The director called her and Coulson in for questioning simultaneously. They were exhibiting the same symptoms, clearly indicating that something had been discovered. Chapter 114 Spell Barrier. Nick Fury didn't hide anything, nodding directly. "That's right. Our people found some spent shell casings bearing the Stark Industries logo while dealing with the Arkwright genetics base. So I suspect that the person who rescued Tony Stark from the Ten Rings, altered your memories, and burned down the entire Arkwright genetics base was this George, for whom we can't find any information. Or perhaps it's someone from some mysterious organization we don't know about." "Director, still no information on him?" Coulson asked, a look of surprise on his face. It was understandable that they hadn't found George's information in the database before, but the fact that SHIELD's extensive investigation hadn't yielded any results was unbelievable. With SHIELD's capabilities, if they wanted to, they could easily find him even with dozens of fake identities. "No, this guy seems to have appeared out of thin air, without any clues. I met with Tony Stark last night, but I couldn't get any information about him." Nick Fury's expression was somewhat serious. "So, from now on, you all stop all your missions and fully cooperate with a memory recovery treatment, an organization that suddenly appeared, completely beyond his control and understanding, and possessing extraordinary power, the ability to modify memories, cannot be left unattended. He must quickly find out the origins of this person and their purpose in approaching Tony Stark." Half a month later, with the assistance of various advanced technologies and professional psychologists and hypnotists, Coulson and Black Widow finally found some forgotten memories in their minds. "So he's a mutant created by Arkwright genetics. No wonder we couldn't find any information about him." Combining Coulson and Black Widow's descriptions with the intelligence that SHIELD had previously collected about Arkwright genetics, Nick Fury, the director of SHIELD, roughly understood everything. George was a mutant created by Arkwright genetics, but he later broke free of control and led a group of younger mutants out of the base, eventually finding Wolverine, who had disappeared for many years. With Wolverine's help, they escaped to New York, then went to Afghanistan to rescue Tony Stark, and with Tony Stark's help, destroyed the entire Arkwright genetics base. Of course, many details are still unclear, such as how George and his group found Tony Stark in Afghanistan. But that's the general outline. When it comes to mutants and superpowers, many things cannot be deduced using common sense. "Coulson, you will continue to be in charge of Tony Stark, conducting his Avengers eligibility assessment." In the director's office, Nick Fury issued the task to Coulson and then looked at Black Widow. "Your task is to find out as soon as possible where George and Wolverine and those other mutants are hiding in New York. We can't let a group of mutants with superpowers move around freely." He originally wanted to send Black Widow to be in charge of Tony Stark, but Tony Stark had likely already met with Black Widow, and sending her would only cause resentment. It would be better to let the more agreeable Coulson take over, especially since they had already established a good relationship. As for George and the other mutants like Wolverine, although they didn't seem to be causing much of an impact yet, this uncertain factor still needed to be kept under his control and monitoring. Otherwise, if any unexpected situation arose, he wouldn't be able to manage the overall situation and handle it in the best way. Meanwhile, inside the mutant school, Wolverine, smoking a large cigar, watched George writing strange symbols on the school wall and couldn't help but ask curiously, "What are you doing?" Setting up a magical barrier, George continued drawing without turning his head. Wolverine looked completely bewildered. "What's a magical barrier? You wouldn't understand even if I told you. Just think of it as a special ability to prevent outsiders from invading the school. History class is about to start, aren't you going to hurry up and go?" George waved his hand dismissively, and Wolverine didn't mind, stubbed out his cigar, and happily ran off to teach the children. Because of his previous experiences, Wolverine now really enjoyed being at school teaching history to the children. Without Wolverine bothering him, George set up his spell barriers even faster. Levy's word magic was one of the main spells he was learning during this period. Unlike other spells, which mostly required self-study, word magic allowed him to frequently seek guidance from Levy, with whom he had a good relationship. Levy wasn't like other mages who were often away on missions, sometimes only seen once every 10 days or 2 weeks. She, like George, spent most of her time in the library reading and accumulating magical knowledge. Therefore, George could ask her for advice regularly. The key difficulty in learning word magic lay in accumulating magical knowledge, something George had never neglected since joining Fairy Tail, making it easier for him to grasp the basics. Unlike the transformation magic, which, even after returning from the mission in Krabata City, hadn't yielded significant progress despite frequent consultations with Urza. However, during his time learning word magic with Levy, his focus wasn't on three-dimensional text within word magic, but rather on spell script. Word magic is mainly divided into several categories: three-dimensional text, spell script, dark text, and demonic text. What you can usually learn in the library is about three-dimensional writing and spell script. Dark writing and demonic writing are forbidden magic, and you won't find related spell books in the library. Three-dimensional writing mainly uses the effect of making the words appear in 3 dimensions to fight. For example, writing fire will materialize a fire attack, writing wind will materialize a wind attack, and writing silence will silence the surrounding area. However, precisely because there are many kinds of effects, it is difficult to improve the power of each materialization. Even Levy has been studying for so many years and is only at an intermediate level. George also feels that many of the effects of these spells can be replaced by spells from Harry Potter magic. Therefore, he prefers to focus on spell script first, and learn the basics of three-dimensional writing first. Spell script is different from three-dimensional writing. It is difficult to use it immediately in battle, but the effect is very good. It can be used to write a spell with rules on the surface of any object or in space. Once completed, the spell will form an invisible barrier. Once someone enters the spell's area, the rules automatically take effect and are difficult to break by brute force. Only those who meet the spell's requirements can enter or exit. However, because the written rules are very strict, if a mistake is made or the rules are rewritten, the original rules will become invalid or be rewritten to favor the other party. Chapter 115: The Basilisk Attack. First update. George is currently inscribing the most basic spell barrage for the school. His rule is that only mutants can enter and exit the barrage, non-mutants cannot freely enter or exit. Because it's the simplest spell barrage, its protective strength isn't very strong, but it shouldn't be a problem stopping ordinary people. He wasn't a professional spy or agent in his previous life, and his previous actions must have left many loopholes. Ordinary people might not notice them, but professional intelligence and spy organizations like SHIELD and Hydra would definitely be aware of them. Following the clues to the mutant school is only a matter of time. Although he has covered the entire school with a Muggle blocking charm, there's no guarantee that SHIELD and Hydra don't have some advanced technology. Muggles in the Harry Potter world couldn't find Diagon Alley because of their low technological level, but the Marvel world has all sorts of advanced technology, so they might be able to break the Muggle blocking charm. If the Muggle blocking charm is broken, this basic spell barrage can stop all agents and spies trying to infiltrate the school, buying everyone time to react. Actually, it's just that his wand amplification effect in this world isn't very good. Because Phoenix's hair was from a clone and lacked the Phoenix Force, the new wand made from it wasn't much stronger than the one made from Professor X's hair. Therefore, the unseen stretch charm he used in the Marvel Universe was far less effective than in the fairy tale and Harry Potter worlds. Otherwise, he could have considered simply moving the entire school to space expanded using the unseen stretch charm, which would have been much safer. As it was relatively safe. Ordinary people couldn't see the school, and even if they could, They couldn't break in. If someone forcibly blew open the barrier with weapons, Wolverine and Professor X wouldn't be easily fooled. After Professor X was replaced with a younger body, his mental abilities dropped from level 4 to level 3, but even a level 3 Professor X could render any intruding agents or spies completely incapacitated. Done. Because he was only a beginner in word magic, George worked until evening before finally setting up the spell barrier covering the entire school. I still need to find a more suitable wand core. Phoenix's hair wasn't effective, and dragon crystals weren't easy to obtain in the fairy tale world. He needed to try other methods. Maybe I should try the Hulk's hair, or Thor's hair, or Loki's hair. After all, Thor and Loki are gods, so their hair shouldn't be too bad, George thought to himself on his way back to his dorm. If Odin were willing to give me a hair, and I could also get some Euro metal and a branch from the world tree, I might be able to make a wand even better than the one from fairy tale, but after thinking about it carefully, even if he considered that, he'd probably have to wait several months. The Hulk hadn't come to New York yet, and Thor and Loki were still in Asgard. Forget it, I should focus on studying magic first. The Hulk was manageable, but Loki and the Destroyer were not easy to deal with. If he wanted to take advantage of the situation to get what he wanted, he needed to be strong enough. Now that the school had a spell barrier, he planned to shut himself off from the outside world for a while and focus all his energy on studying the magic of fairy tale and the Harry Potter world. He wanted to improve his strength by another level in the next few months. A little over a month later, in the Harry Potter world, it was May aside from a Quidditch match against Hufflepuff, where he decisively won, proving his Quidditch talent once again. Nothing else happened. Until the day of the Gryffindor vs Ravenclaw Quidditch match. As usual, George finished breakfast early and went to the library. He'd been researching the Blast Charm, a powerful and dangerous curse that could destroy anything it touched. He knew that Peter Pettigrew had once used it to blow up an entire street, killing 12 Muggles. Hermione, why are you in such a hurry? Why aren't you watching the match? George looked slightly surprised to see Hermione panting at the library entrance. With a Quidditch match today, all the teachers and students were heading to the Quidditch pitch. Besides Mrs. Pants, he was the only one in the library reading. Although Hermione also enjoyed reading at the library, she couldn't possibly miss the Gryffindor Quidditch match and cheer on Harry. George, it's so good to see you here. I think I know what the monster in the Chamber of Secrets is. Could you help me find a book about dangerous magical creatures? Hermione, having recovered slightly, excitedly grabbed George's hand. George was taken aback for a moment, then nodded. Of course, no problem. While helping Hermione find the book, he thought to himself, could it be today? He knew that in the original story, Hermione was attacked by the basilisk after finding clues to the Chamber of Secrets, but he couldn't recall the exact day of the attack. Is this the one? After searching for a while, George handed Hermione a very old magic book that described the basilisk. Hermione, upon receiving the spellbook, exclaimed excitedly, it's this one, Fantastic Beasts, the Deadly Monsters. Let me find it. She pulled George to the reading area, opened Fantastic Beasts, the Deadly Monsters, and quickly found this section about the basilisk, reading it aloud to him. In our land, many terrible beasts and monsters roam, the most bizarre and deadly of which is the basilisk, also known as the Serpent King. This serpent can grow to enormous sizes and usually lives for hundreds of years. It hatches from a toad inside a male egg. The basilisk kills in astonishing ways. Besides its deadly fangs, its gaze can also be fatal. Anyone caught in its gaze will die instantly. Spiders flee at the sight of the basilisk, for it is their mortal enemy, and the basilisk flees at the sound of a rooster crowing, for that sound is also deadly to it. So, you suspect the monster in the Chamber of Secrets is the basilisk? George asked softly after Hermione finished reading. Hermione nodded. Yes, I suspect the monster in the Chamber of Secrets is the basilisk. It moves through the school's pipes. Myrtle must have died because she saw the basilisk's eyes. During these attacks, Mrs. Norris saw the basilisk's eyes through reflections in the water, so she was only petrified, not killed. Colin didn't see it directly because the camera didn't, and Headless Nick was already dead. That makes sense. Maybe we should report this to Dumbledore. George seemed completely convinced of Hermione's reasoning and casually asked, by the way, how's Harry's diary? Any new leads? You mean Riddle's diary? It was stolen yesterday, and just before coming to the library, Harry said he heard strange noises again. I suspect it's the basilisk's voice. Because Harry is a Parseltongue, he can always hear it. Hermione pulled George up. Let's find Dumbledore now. Since the basilisk has reappeared, we're all in danger, let's keep grinding. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116 George falls from the sky. You should be the one attacked, George thought to himself as Hermione pulled him away from the library. Most of the young wizards had gone to the Quidditch pitch, leaving only him, Hermione, and a few others at school. The basilisk would definitely target Hermione, a muggle, first. Especially for Voldemort, Hermione was Harry's good friend. However, George wasn't worried. His plan was to lure the basilisk out, clear Hagrid's name, and temporarily remove Dumbledore from the school. Now was the perfect opportunity. It's here. Not long after leaving the library, George sensed the basilisk around the corner. His telepathic abilities weren't as strong as the professor's, but he could still sense a small area around him. The basilisk's hostility was obvious. George, something seems wrong, Hermione suddenly stopped, her voice trembling. She faintly heard the basilisk moving towards them from behind. Don't look back, it might be the basilisk. Once you see its eyes, you're dead. Listen to me, keep going. George grabbed Hermione's trembling hand and hurried towards the stairs. As George and Hermione increased their speed, the basilisk seemed to sense their approach and suddenly accelerated towards them. Hearing the approaching sound behind them, Hermione's legs were already weak, but as a Gryffindor wizard, she was indeed brave enough to say to George, "George, go find Dumbledore and tell him about the basilisk. I'll hold it off." As she spoke, she drew her wand. However, George grabbed Hermione's waist and drew his wand. "Trust me, we can escape. Close your eyes, and whatever you do, don't look into the basilisk's eyes." Sensing the basilisk's presence that was now close behind them, George instantly activated his wings spell, growing a pair of pure white wings. He carried Hermione and flew away, narrowly avoiding the basilisk escaping Ma. At the same time, he waved his wand downwards. Sleight of hand, a transparent blade flew from the wand, striking the basilisk's head as it was about to raise it. The basilisk's magical defense was astonishing. The sleight of hand spell didn't break through its defenses, but it still caused it to lower its massive head in pain. George seized the opportunity to accelerate, continuing to fly towards the stairs. Hermione, suddenly lifted into the air, instinctively grabbed George, burying her face in his chest and exclaiming, "George, you can fly. This isn't the time for that." George continued to flap his wings to accelerate, while the basilisk relentlessly pursued him. In fact, he had the situation under control, as he hadn't even reached his maximum speed, mainly to prevent the basilisk from giving up. He would even deliberately slow down when the distance widened. If the basilisk showed any signs of giving up, he would casually wave his wand and cast a sleight of hand spell behind it to further provoke it. Today, they needed to make a big commotion. Even if the teachers and students didn't see it, they needed to at least let the figures in the paintings at the stairwell see the basilisk. That would be convincing enough. Otherwise, with no proof from him and Hermione, they couldn't prove that what they saw was a basilisk and not an eight-eyed spider. Oh my god, what's that? How terrifying. Hide, poor little wizard, run. Finally, after George's constant luring, the basilisk was led to one of the 142 movable staircases at Hogwarts, and was seen by all the figures in the paintings. Seeing that their goal had been achieved, George picked up Hermione and flew up the stairwell. The basilisk, unable to ascend the movable staircase, could only let out an angry hiss and turn to disappear into a nearby pipe. Dumbledore should be in the Quidditch pitch. Let's go there. Having shaken off the basilisk, George didn't linger. He flew to the 8th floor, found a window, and flew out with Hermione. Now, all that's needed is to find Dumbledore and explain the situation, and everything will be settled. As for the flying magic he displayed, that was, of course, magic created by the prodigy himself. Snape could create spells like the sleight of hand and the hook arrow during his student days, so his creation of flying magic, though somewhat forced, wasn't entirely unbelievable. After all, he's George. In everyone's eyes, he's always been so outstanding. The constant cultivation of his genius persona was all paving the way for this. Even though he's only a first-year student, geniuses are always unreasonable, right? While George was thinking about what to say when they got to the Quidditch pitch, he didn't notice that Hermione, who was holding him, had a different look in her eyes. "Hi, today is the 4th Quidditch match, Gryffindor vs Ravenclaw. Next, let's welcome..." "Oh, Merlin's underwear, what did I just see?" In the stands, commentator Jordan, amidst the cheers of the entire school's young wizards, was about to announce the entrance of the Quidditch players. Suddenly, George appeared above the Quidditch pitch, flapping his pure white wings and carrying Hermione. Snape was completely stunned. Of course, he wasn't the only one stunned, all the young wizards in the school were stunned. There, George arrived above the Quidditch pitch, glanced around, spotted Dumbledore sitting in the professor's stand, and flew directly over. "George, what's going on?" Snape was the first to react, standing up as George folded his wings and put Hermione down. George didn't waste any time, getting straight to the point. Headmaster, Hermione and I were attacked by a basilisk near the library." After hearing George and Hermione's account, all the professors gasped. Dumbledore's expression showed a hint of surprise, whether from the fact that the monster in the Chamber of Secrets was a basilisk, or from the fact that George and Hermione had escaped its pursuit. In fact, George had never known whether Dumbledore knew about the basilisk. He guessed he did, but whether he truly knew, only Dumbledore himself knew. "Minerva, inform them that the Quidditch match is cancelled. All students, please remain here on the pitch until we have inspected the school, then return to the common room." Professor McGonagall nodded solemnly, then loudly relayed Dumbledore's order using a megaphone charm. "You've done a good job. Slytherin and Gryffindor, each get 20 points. Dumbledore nodded kindly to George and Hermione, then led Snape, Flitwick, and the other professors to the castle, while Professor McGonagall remained on the Quidditch pitch to maintain order. Chapter 117 The Genius Who Creates Magic. The Quidditch match was abruptly stopped, and Dumbledore and the professors hurriedly left the arena, clearly indicating that something significant had happened. The young wizard speculated that it was related to George and Hermione's sudden appearance from the sky, but Professor McGonagall blocked their way, preventing them from directly questioning the two. If Professor McGonagall hadn't been there, the two would have been surrounded by the insatiable curiosity of the young wizards. Nevertheless, various speculations abounded. Of course, the most discussed topic was why George could conjure wings and fly. Had he learned some new magic, or did he possess avian wizarding blood? 2 full hours passed before Professor McGonagall allowed the prefects of each house to lead the young wizards back to the castle's common room in groups. It turned out that Dumbledore and his group hadn't found the basilisk in the castle, but they had indeed found traces left from its attack and the statements of the figures in the oil painting, suggesting that the basilisk might have retreated back to the Chamber of Secrets. "George, Hermione, come with me." After all the young wizards had returned to the common room, Professor McGonagall led George and Hermione separately to Dumbledore's headmaster's office. "Should we tell the professors about Harry and the diary later?" Hermione asked quietly on the way to the headmaster's office. Harry could hear the basilisk's baboon's murmurs, and there were things about Reed in the diary. These were Harry's secrets, and he didn't want to tell his teachers yet, so Hermione was conflicted. George had only mentioned their attack by the basilisk, not Harry's secrets, and she didn't know if she should confess when the headmaster asked. George thought for a moment and whispered in Hermione's ear, "Don't say anything yet. Go back and discuss it with Harry, see what he thinks. Anyway, as long as we prove the monster in the Chamber of Secrets is a basilisk and not a spider, Hagrid won't be considered the heir to the Chamber of Secrets and the murderer of Myrtle." He was afraid that if he revealed everything, the professors might follow the clues to the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, and if they found the basilisk beforehand, his plan would be ruined. He didn't need Dumbledore to leave the school for long like in the original story. Even just a day was enough for him to go to the forbidden section and memorize all the powerful dark magic. "Okay, I understand," Hermione nodded. She also felt that such things needed Harry's permission before being mentioned. Lemonade, on the 8th floor, in front of a hideously large stone monster, Professor McGonagall gave the command, and the monster suddenly came to life, leaping aside, the wall behind it splitting in two. Behind the wall was a spiral staircase, slowly ascending like an escalator. "Follow me." George and Hermione followed Professor McGonagall up the spiral staircase, which quickly ascended, soon stopping before an oak door with a griffin-shaped brass knocker. Pushing open the gleaming oak door, Dumbledore's headmaster's office came into view. It was a spacious, beautiful circular room, filled with all sorts of comical little noises. On the long-legged table sat many strange and wonderful silver objects, spinning and emitting wisps of smoke. The walls were covered with portraits of former headmasters, men and women, all gently snoring in their frames. Another enormous table stood in the room, its legs claw-shaped. Atop a tall, gilded perch stood a beautiful little bird with the golden tail feathers. Clearly, it was Dumbledore's pet fox, the only phoenix in the world capable of rebirth from fire and never dying. On a shelf behind the table lay a tattered, wrinkled wizard's hat, the sorting hat he had worn when he entered the school. This wasn't his first time in the headmaster's office. He had signed his contract to join the English Quidditch team there, and a photo had been taken. At this moment, Dumbledore and Snape were standing at the table, talking. No other professors were visible. They were presumably positioned around the castle to prevent a basilisk from reappearing. "Headmaster, George and Miss Granger have arrived," McGonagall's voice interrupted their discussion, and they both turned to look at George and Hermione. "Very well, please sit down. George and Miss Granger, could you please recount your encounter with the basilisk in more detail?" Dumbledore gently ushered them to the sofa next to his office and had a house elf bring 2 glasses of juice for George and Hermione. George took the juice and calmly began to recount what had happened. He didn't mention that Hermione had discovered clues about the basilisk and came to the library to find a book. He only said that Hermione came to him to watch Quidditch, and then the two of them left the library and were attacked by the basilisk. He used the Shadow Step charm taught to him by Snape to fend off the basilisk and escaped with Hermione. "I always thought Severus taught you such a dangerous spell a bit too early, but now it seems I was wrong. You did very well. But where did you learn your flying spell?" Dumbledore knew that Snape was going to teach George the Shadow Step charm, but Snape hadn't said he'd teach George a flying spell. He'd just confirmed with Snape that Snape hadn't. The key point was that the flying spell George demonstrated was different from the one Snape learned from Voldemort. Snape's flying spell from Voldemort involved turning his body into a black shadow and flying at high speed, while George's involved sprouting wings from his back and flying by flapping them. George stood up, activated a wings spell, and white magical wings reappeared on his back. "This is a new spell I tried to create in a flash of inspiration. I call it wings magic. It can conjure a pair of wings that carry me like a bird." The magic in the Harry Potter world and the magic in the fairy tale world have many differences, but they aren't completely different. After studying the fundamental magical principles of both worlds for some time, he discovered that with sufficient depth, conversion between them wasn't impossible. For example, if fairy tale magic were cast using the spellcasting methods of the Harry Potter world, its power would be significantly amplified with the aid of a wand. Conversely, casting magic from the Harry Potter world using fairy tale magic circles directly eliminated the time spent waving the wand and chanting. While he couldn't actually do this with his current magical skill, he could certainly engage in some theoretical discussions. Therefore, after demonstrating wing magic and explaining a small part of its principles using the magical theories of this world, Dumbledore, Snape, and Professor McGonagall immediately believed him as legendary and top wizards. The three were well aware that the principles of the wing magic George described hadn't appeared in any spellbooks before, and it did indeed possess a certain degree of feasibility. Chapter 118 Misunderstanding. "I never expected you to create such a difficult spell in your first year." "That's truly impressive." Dumbledore, who had always been somewhat wary of George, couldn't help but feel admiration for him. He felt that if George didn't go astray, he might truly become one of the top wizards in terms of magical talent. "Our Slytherin students are always excellent." Snape, who had been silent until now, smiled slightly. He felt that George was very similar to him. As his last disciple, he had not only mastered the shadow spell so quickly but had also created his own spell. However, George, creating new spells is a very dangerous thing. You should be more careful next time. If you don't understand anything, be sure to ask me first. Many wizards have died because of creating new magic. Luna's mother died in an accident because of it. Therefore, although Snape was very proud of George's creation of a new spell in his first year, he still gave him a very serious warning. "Thank you, Headmaster. I will come to you for guidance." Hearing Snape's words, George naturally agreed readily. If Snape were willing to dedicate more time to teaching him, he would undoubtedly improve his magical skills much faster, learning more advanced spells. The illusion charm for invisibility, apparition for teleportation, animagus, the patronus charm, various magical alchemy and dark magic, and so on. There was so much more for him to learn. Now that things are clear, Severus, Minerva, escort them back to the common room. I need to discuss the next steps with the Board of Governors." After clarifying everything, Dumbledore waved, and Professor Snape and Professor McGonagall led George and Hermione away from the headmaster's office. "Hermione, this was an accident. With your intelligence, I believe you will create your own spells in the future." After leaving the headmaster's office, George noticed Hermione's expression was a little off and assumed she had been hurt by her strong sense of pride, so he kindly offered a word of comfort. Hermione was a top student, but she relied too much on textbook knowledge, which resulted in her creativity being somewhat lacking compared to wizards like Snape. However, that was still far better than the wizarding talent of his current body. He was mainly cheating. Oh, yes, that's right, I'll try my best." Hermione's blush flashed and disappeared, then she nodded somewhat flusteredly. She wasn't thinking about what George had just said. George and Hermione's expressions and conversation were all observed by Snape and McGonagall, who were escorting them from behind, and both of them showed surprise at the same time. Then, McGonagall's originally serious expression turned into a maternal smile. She didn't expect that her house's most outstanding Gryffindor girl would have developed a special affection for a young Slytherin wizard. However, as the head of Gryffindor, she didn't feel any aversion. After all, George, this young Slytherin, was also one of her favorite students, and George had just saved Hermione from the basilisk's mouth. This was like a plot that only appeared in the romance novels she had read when she was young. As long as it didn't affect their grades, she didn't mind young wizards dating. Hogwarts was very open-minded in this regard. Otherwise, Lockhart's Valentine's Day proposal wouldn't have been approved. In a normal Muggle school, if a teacher dared to lead students in dating, writing love letters, or even using potions, they would be expelled the next day, or even sent to the police station. Snape's expression was much more complex. At first, he frowned, then seemed to remember something, his expression becoming somewhat blank as he fell into some kind of memory. Finally, a happiness he had never shown before appeared on his face. "George, I'm going back now," Hermione said to George in a slightly flustered tone, then quickly walked with Professor McGonagall towards the Gryffindor entrance on the 8th floor. "Okay, give my regards to Harry and Ron." George smiled and nodded, continuing towards the stairwell. The Gryffindor dormitories were also on the 8th floor, just a few turns away, while the Slytherin dormitories were in the castle's basement, requiring one to go down the stairs to the hall and then into the basement. Was she frightened? George didn't think much of Hermione's slightly unusual behavior. His mind was currently filled with the dark magic in the forbidden section of the library. Back at the entrance to the Slytherin common room with the usually taciturn Snape, George greeted him and was about to use his password to enter when Snape suddenly said something that left him somewhat bewildered. "George, don't always be so obsessed with magic. Spend more time with her, especially since you're in different houses. It's never as convenient as being in the same house. If you accidentally say something hurtful, make sure to explain yourself clearly." Without waiting for George's reaction, Snape turned and left, leaving George completely confused. He wasn't talking about Hermione, was he? The mention of her, and the fact that they were in different houses, made it hard not to think of Hermione, whom he had just parted ways with. Could it be, he thinks Hermione and I are dating? He blinked, and he roughly guessed what was going on. He felt that Snape might see a reflection of himself and the deceased Lily in him and Hermione. Come to think of it, there was a resemblance. Snape was an excellent Slytherin, as was George. Lily was the best Gryffindor at the time, as was Hermione. Snape was a half-blood wizard, as was he. Lily was a Muggle-born witch, as was Hermione. Lily had a Potter in her class, and Hermione had a Potter in her class, and they all got along quite well. No wonder Snape said those things. He didn't want him to repeat his mistakes. But this misunderstanding was too big. He liked Hermione? How could that be? A 13-year-old kid. Whether it was Harry, Ron, Colin, or Hermione, Ginny, and Luna, he treated them all the same, like children, without a single other thought. Shaking his head, he thought, let the misunderstanding be. Anyway, these things couldn't be explained clearly, and it wouldn't affect his plans. Noble, reciting this week's password, George pushed open the door and entered the Slytherin common room. As soon as he entered, he was surrounded by the young wizards, who bombarded him with questions about what had happened. Since neither Dumbledore nor Snape had said to keep it a secret, he simply repeated what he had said in the headmaster's office. Upon hearing that the monster in the Chamber of Secrets was the terrifying basilisk, many young wizards were startled. However, Some, like Malfoy, were more extreme, believing that the basilisk wouldn't attack Slytherins, but only Muggle-born wizards. They were all utterly dumbfounded when they heard that George had created flight magic. Especially after George demonstrated it to everyone in the common room. Chapter 119 The Three Unforgivable Curses and the Fiend Curse. The next morning, Snape arrived early at the Slytherin common room and issued a notice to all the young Slytherin wizards. From today onwards, all students must be back in their own house's common room by 6 o'clock in the evening. No student may leave their dormitory after this time. Each student will be escorted to class by a teacher. No student may use the washrooms without a teacher's accompaniment. All Quidditch practice and matches are postponed, and no further activities will be held in the evenings. As Snape escorted the young Slytherin wizards to the Great Hall for dinner, George approached and asked, "Headmaster, has the basilisk been found yet?" "No, the castle's pipes have been searched, but only some remaining scales of the basilisk were found. The Chamber of Secrets where it is hiding has not been located," Snape replied. "Dumbledore has been temporarily suspended by the Board of Governors because of this matter and has been left there after going to the Ministry of Magic in London last night. The school may be closed for a period of time until we find the basilisk and the true heir to the Chamber of Secrets. So be prepared. If you have any academic problems during the closure, come to Spider's End to find me. After the school closes, all teachers and students must leave the school. The Ministry of Magic will send Aurors to conduct a thorough search of the school until the basilisk is found and killed before classes can resume." But even Dumbledore couldn't find the Chamber of Secrets, so he didn't think the Aurors from the Ministry of Magic would be able to. Therefore, this closure might not be short. As Slytherin's most outstanding and talented wizard, he didn't want George's studies to be delayed because of this. "Thank you, Headmaster," George nodded, a glint of light flashing in his eyes. Dumbledore was left in London last night, which meant he could secretly go to the Forbidden Section to study dark magic. After breakfast in the Great Hall this morning, Harry, and the others found George again. "I've decided to tell Dumbledore about hearing the basilisk's voice and the diary. Maybe that will help us catch the basilisk." After thinking it over all night, Harry made his choice. He no longer intended to hide it from Dumbledore and the professors. But George shook his head. "I learned from the headmaster this morning that Dumbledore has been temporarily suspended and is currently being held at the Ministry of Magic in London. He probably won't be back anytime soon. This is troublesome. With Dumbledore gone, there will probably be attacks every day," Ron exclaimed in alarm, and Harry and Hermione frowned as well. The departure of Dumbledore, their pillar of strength, immediately made them panic. Seeing this, George changed the subject. "Let's think about it carefully these next few days. Maybe we can come up with some clues. I'm planning to go see Hagrid later. Now that it's confirmed the monster in the Chamber of Secrets is a basilisk and not an eight-eyed spider, Hagrid's crimes from back then are unfounded, and he shouldn't be affected." "Okay, let's go too." Hermione immediately raised her hand, surprising Harry and Ron. They rarely saw Hermione so enthusiastic. So, after breakfast, the three of them went to visit Hagrid. It was Sunday, and they didn't have school. From Hagrid, they learned that the Ministry of Magic had informed Hagrid early that morning that his ban on using a wand had been lifted. They explained that while Dumbledore had been temporarily suspended, he had provided evidence proving the monster in the Chamber of Secrets was not the eight-eyed spider but a basilisk. Therefore, the Ministry of Magic overturned the original verdict that Hagrid was a murderer, restoring his right to use a wand again. Hearing this good news, Harry, his friends, and George finally felt some relief. It was almost noon when they returned from Hagrid's place. George took the opportunity to leave the trio, got a note from Lockhart, and went to the forbidden section of the library. This time, he didn't feel like he was being watched. Killing Curse, Fiendfire, Imperious Curse, Crusadus Curse, here I come. After setting up his Marvel Universe self on the computer, he began copying down the dark magic books he had previously dared not touch. It was unrealistic to expect to memorize and understand those obscure dark spells in an afternoon. But he could copy them all down first and study them later. He copied until 5:30 p.m. before finally borrowing a normal spellbook and leisurely leaving the library. For the next few days, he didn't go to the library's restricted section again. Once was enough, any more would arouse suspicion, and besides, he had already found all the spells he wanted in half a day. Now it was time to slowly study and practice. Summer quietly arrived, and the sky above the castle and the surrounding lake turned a pale blue with a purplish glow. Large, Cabbage-like flowers bloomed in the greenhouse. But the atmosphere in the castle grew increasingly tense. Dumbledore was gone, and fear was spreading rapidly in an unprecedented way. Every face in the school looked anxious and uneasy, and every laugh that echoed in the corridors sounded jarring and strange, quickly suppressed. It was another Saturday, and George secretly found a secluded spot on the Forbidden Forest to practice dark magic. Sure enough, it's not that simple. Around noon, he sighed and left the Forbidden Forest, heading towards the castle. Both the Fiend Fire and the 3 unforgivable curses are extremely high-level dark magic, and learning them on his own would be far too inefficient. However, he couldn't possibly consult any of the professors at the school, including Snape. Perhaps I need an expert in this area. At that moment, George suddenly remembered Voldemort's soul within the diary. The soul within the diary was a fragment of Voldemort's soul that had split off when he was 16. While the 16-year-old Voldemort certainly didn't possess as much knowledge as the original Voldemort, George felt that the 16-year-old Voldemort should have already mastered a considerable amount of dark magic. Teaching him, a novice, would be more than enough. He hadn't considered this possibility before because at that time, his strength was too great to attempt to seize the diary. He would easily be discovered by Dumbledore and might even be controlled by Voldemort's soul. But now it was different. Dumbledore was still in London at the Ministry of Magic and couldn't return for the time being, giving him ample time to plan the seizure of the diary. And with his current strength, especially after learning light magic to control darkness and curses, it would be extremely difficult for a mere fragment of Voldemort's soul to influence him. As he walked and pondered, George gradually formed a new plan. He wasn't a rigid person, plans were necessary. But flexibility was also crucial. As his strength continued to increase, many of his original plans needed to be revised to more effectively enhance his power. Chapter 120 Infiltrating the Girls' Dormitory. Ginny, what's wrong? You seem a bit listless lately. On Thursday afternoon during flight lesson, George smiled as he approached Ginny, who was sitting alone against a large tree. Ginny usually loved flight lesson the most, always the most energetic student, but lately she seemed listless even during class. George, do you think if someone makes a mistake, but not intentionally, they can be forgiven? Ginny asked, somewhat confused, as George approached. George thought for a moment and replied, that depends on how brave they are. Making a mistake isn't terrible, everyone makes mistakes, even Dumbledore, who is said to have made many mistakes in his youth. But if, after realizing their mistake, they bravely admit it and correct it promptly, then they can definitely be forgiven. Really? As long as they correct it promptly, they can be forgiven. Hope immediately shone in Ginny's eyes. Before the start of the school year, she found a magical notebook among the used books she bought. No matter what she wrote in it, the notebook would reply and offer helpful advice. She grew to trust the notebook more and more, chatting with it daily and telling it her secrets. Until one day, she found her body becoming uncontrollable, even opening the Chamber of Secrets and releasing the basilisk to attack her classmates. She realized the notebook might be the problem, so she secretly threw it into the bathroom, hoping the sewers would flush it away, but Harry retrieved it. Worried that Harry would discover her secrets and the mistakes she had made, she stole the notebook from the boys' dormitory. However, in recent days, she seems to be controlled again, even releasing the basilisk that nearly killed her best friends George and Hermione, causing Headmaster Dumbledore to be suspended. Oh, by the way, this is a bookmark I bought in Diagon Alley at Christmas. The shopkeeper said it can ward off dark magic and curses, and bring good luck to its owner. Here, it's for you. George pulled a butterfly-shaped iron bookmark from his wizard's robes and handed it to Ginny. Ginny took the bookmark, a smile finally appearing on her face. Thank you, George, I really like this bookmark, you're cuter when you smile. George reached out and ruffled Ginny's hair before getting up and leaving. Ginny watched George's departing figure, touched her hair, and for some reason, a blush crept onto her face. That night, in the Gryffindor girls' dormitory, Ginny tucked the butterfly bookmark George had given her into that dreadful notebook. She hoped the bookmark would ward off the diary's control over her. Tomorrow morning, I'll tell Harry and the others everything. After putting the diary away in the box under her bed, Ginny had made up her mind. George's words today had given her courage. At 2 in the morning, in the Slytherin boys' dormitory, George suddenly opened his eyes and sat up. He then picked up his wand and quickly cast the same spell 3 times on his 3 roommates. Sleepy charm. Although the 3 boys didn't usually get up at night, George thought it best to cast a sleeping charm on each of them just in case. He quietly left the Slytherin dormitory and went to a secluded corner outside the castle. A magic circle flashed around him, and his body instantly swelled from that of a child to a size larger than a normal adult. Then he pointed his wand at himself. Transformation, his pajamas, which had been stretched almost to bursting open, quickly transformed into standard night clothes that only revealed his eyes. The spell he cast on himself was called the Clothing Transformation Charm, like the Snake Summoning Charm and the Bird Summoning Charm, which were extensions of transfiguration magic. He had learned this spell from a magic book in the library called How to Become an Elegant Wizard. Its function is simple. It allows you to change the style of your clothes according to your own will, eliminating the worry of buying new clothes. Actually, if you spend more time reading in the library, you can discover many strange and wonderful spells. They may not have much power, but they can certainly make your life much more convenient. These are all magics created by wizards for everyday life. After doing all this, he conjured a flying broomstick out of thin air with a flick of his wrist. He bought this broomstick in Diagon Alley during the Christmas holidays and later placed it in a box he had expanded with the unseen stretch charm, bringing it to Hogwarts. Because his dress-up magic had recently improved to the point where he could create a space large enough to hold 2 magical weapons, he put the flying broomstick inside. Why not use flight magic? Tonight he planned to sneak into the Gryffindor girls' dormitory to steal the diary, so he couldn't leave any trace. Riding the flying broomstick, he didn't fly directly to the 8th floor of the Gryffindor Tower, but instead circled around for a full hour before flying back from another direction. He needed to avoid being tracked down as much as possible. Based on the magnetic mark he had left on the butterfly, he quickly located Ginny's dormitory. The staircases leading to all the girls' dormitories at Hogwarts were enchanted, preventing boys from entering. Therefore, to sneak into the girls' dormitory and steal the diary, he couldn't enter from the common room. He had to find an entrance from outside the tower. However, the staircases leading to the boys' dormitories were unenchanted, allowing girls free access. He was often mistakenly entered by girls of the same year and older under various elaborate excuses, so now he mostly studied in the library or some abandoned classroom in the basement. Ginny's previous ability to freely enter Harry's dormitory and steal the diary was also due to this. Alohomora, he tapped his wand lightly on the window, and after hearing a snap, he carefully opened the window and went inside, having put away his flying broomstick. Looks like I didn't make a mistake. Seeing Ginny sleeping soundly on the bed, George quickly located the metal butterfly using his senses. As expected, he carefully retrieved the tattered diary from the box under the bed, a slight smile appearing on his face. The main purpose of his words during the day was to get Ginny to place the metal butterfly bookmark in the diary so he could easily find it. Otherwise, he would have to search for it after entering, needlessly increasing the risk of being exposed. He tossed Voldemort's diary directly into his dressing space and left quickly the way he came. End of month request for monthly votes. One more day of grinding. Chapter 121 Opening the Secret Chamber. Got it. After returning from the girls' dormitory, he didn't immediately go back to his own dormitory. Instead, he rode his flying broomstick away from the castle. He kept a broomstick at maximum speed the entire way, landing in a nearby Muggle city. Disguised as a Muggle, he circled the city's various pubs, changing his appearance and clothing multiple times, before finally returning to Hogwarts. By the time he returned to his normal size in pajamas and lay down in his Slytherin dormitory, it was already 4 in the morning. After dispelling the sleeping spells on his 3 roommates, he closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. The next morning, everything was normal. Except for Ginny herself, no one noticed that he had sneaked into the girls' dormitory and taken Voldemort's diary. Normally, no one should have discovered that he stole the diary last night, but he had no choice. He had to face Dumbledore. Once Ginny confessed, Dumbledore would definitely investigate who stole Voldemort's diary. That's why he had gone through so much trouble last night. Now he just hoped Dumbledore wouldn't use the time turner, because if he did, everything he did last night would likely be for naught. He figured it was unlikely. Hagrid and Sirius were framed back then, and the time turner wasn't used, which meant it wasn't that easy. Crucially, the time turner could only rewind 5 hours, anything beyond that was dangerous. But even if he was discovered, it wouldn't be a big deal. At most, Dumbledore would pay extra attention. What was he doing? He hadn't killed anyone, committed any heinous crimes, just been curious about the diary. He could lie and say he was bewitched by Voldemort. In short, Given Dumbledore's personality, he wouldn't secretly eliminate him just because he stole the diary. So, he wasn't really worried about being exposed. It was just that not being exposed was definitely better for him. His studies at Hogwarts would also be smoother. On Friday morning, there were 2 potions classes as usual. He had just finished lunch in the Great Hall when Harry, Ginny, and the other 2 dragged him to the 3rd-floor bathroom where Moaning Myrtle had been crying. "What are you doing here?" George asked, feigning confusion. Harry took a deep breath and said, "George, Ginny told us something. We might know where the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets is." "George, I don't want to lie to you, I was just really scared. But you're right, you shouldn't run away from what you've done wrong, you should face it bravely." Actually, Ginny stepped forward and recounted her experience again. "So you want Harry to try opening the Chamber of Secrets using Parseltongue's words?" George feigned shock before asking. Hermione nodded. "Yes, if Harry can really open the Chamber of Secrets in Parseltongue, then we'll immediately notify the professors and have them deal with the basilisk inside. That way, no one will be harmed, Dumbledore can return, and the school won't have to close because of the basilisk." "Let's try it then. If we just tell the professors directly without trying, they probably won't believe us." After a moment's thought, George agreed to Harry and the others' plan. Anyway, just opening the entrance wouldn't allow the basilisk to escape, and there was another large door at the very end. Perfect, then the professors could deal with the basilisk, and he wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. It was both safe and secure. He could also witness a battle between the world's top wizards and the basilisk, which would surely be very beneficial for his magical studies. He was quite excited just thinking about it. Following Ginny's instructions, Harry walked to the pool and said to a brass faucet engraved with a small snake, "Open." The entire pool remained unchanged. "Harry, you have to use Parsleyan language, that hissing sound, not normal human language," Ron reminded him nervously. George shielded Ginny and Hermione behind him. "Hold on tight if anything happens." He actually knew there was no danger, but he had to put on an act, otherwise it would seem strange. He had to play the part. Harry and Ron had come to him not only because they trusted him, but also because they valued his abilities and knew he could protect them in case of trouble. George was currently the only young wizard to have escaped the basilisk, not only escaping himself but also rescuing Hermione, which naturally made Harry and the others feel very safe. "Okay, we're not afraid of that guy." Ginny and Hermione grabbed George's robes on either side, nodding slightly, their hands trembling. However, both girls were Gryffindors, and although somewhat afraid, they were also very brave. While holding on to George's robes, they each secretly took out their wands. A moment later, the basilisk would emerge. They weren't going to rely entirely on George, they had their own spells they were skilled at and could offer assistance. Ginny knew there was another door inside, preventing the basilisk from appearing, and had told Harry and the others, but they were still tense. That was the Chamber of Secrets, left behind 1,000 years ago by the 4 legendary Slytherins who founded their house, the most dangerous magical creature, the basilisk, whose gaze could kill anyone it glared at. "Open." Harry closed his eyes, paused for a moment, and spoke again. This time, he didn't speak normal English, but a hissing sound like a snake. Instantly, the dragon head with the serpent symbol emitted a dazzling white light and began to spin rapidly. Then, magic surged, the pool moved, and slowly disappeared, revealing a very thick pipe leading to an unknown depth. The pipe was just thick enough for an adult to crawl through. "I'll stay here and guard it. You guys go and inform the heads of the departments and professors." Seeing the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets appear, George immediately took out his wand, pointed it at the entrance, and said to Harry and the others in a wary stance, "Don't worry, I can fly. Even if the basilisk really appears, it won't be able to catch me." The 4 Harrys exchanged glances, didn't hesitate, and ran towards the heads of the departments as fast as they could. If Voldemort knew, he'd be furious. Watching Harry and the others leave, George thought to himself, thinking of Voldemort's diary in his dressing-up space. This 16-year-old Voldemort had finally gained Ginny's trust and was gradually gaining control over her actions. In another half-month, he could have directly taken over Ginny's body and resurrected her. Now, he had completely ruined everything, and even their trump card, the basilisk, would soon be beaten to death by the professors. Chapter 122 The Basilisk Being Beaten Up. 15 minutes later, led by Harry and his companions, all the school's teachers, including the rather incompetent Lockhart, gathered in the 3rd-floor washroom where Moaning Myrtle had been weeping. This really is the basilisk's entrance. Looking at the thick pipe leading downwards, Snape picked up a palm-sized snake scale from the pipe's opening, his face grave. McGonagall drew her wand and said firmly, "Since it's confirmed to be the basilisk's entrance, let's go down together and deal with it. We can't let it continue harming the students. I don't think we can all go down. We need someone to stay here." "How about I?" Lockhart stammered, looking at the seemingly bottomless pipe. But before he could finish, Snape coldly interrupted him. "That won't do, Lockhart. Now is your time to shine. Go down and lead the way. Yes, we can watch you take care of the basilisk all by yourself. You can even write a new book about it." How wonderful. Even Professor Sprout, the usually good-natured head of Hufflepuff, wore a mocking smile. Cold sweat instantly dripped down Lockhart's face. Professor Flitwick, head of Ravenclaw, followed up. "Lockhart, didn't you tell me yesterday that if you encountered the basilisk alone, you could make it die with just one spell? Did I say that?" "I don't remember." Lockhart tried to evade the question, but Snape wouldn't let him get away with it. "I remember you said that we've made a mess of things and that we should have left it to you from the start. Now is your time to shine. In that case, Lockhart, it's up to you. Go down and deal with the basilisk alone. We'll wait here for your good news." Professor McGonagall spoke last. Lockhart, seeing all the teachers staring at him, swallowed hard and replied, "All right then, I'll go to my office to get some things ready." Going down to fight a basilisk was out of the question. He planned to go back and grab his things, then run away and make up an excuse later. Unfortunately for him, Snape had already seen through his little trick. Just as Lockhart turned to leave, Snape suddenly shoved him, pushing him directly into the pipe. "You're so strong, what do you need to prepare? Just go down." Hearing Lockhart's terrified scream as he slid down the pipe, all the professors wore relieved smiles. "George, you know flying magic, go find Hagrid and bring back a few more roosters. Harry, you come down with me first." As the sound of Lockhart landing safely echoed from the depths of the pipe, Snape turned to George, gave him a brief instruction, and then, with Harry, transformed into a black shadow and flew down into the pipe. According to Ginny, there was another door inside that Harry needed to open using Parseltongue. Since it had already been confirmed that the monster in the Chamber of Secrets was a basilisk, McGonagall had already sent Hagrid to buy roosters to place on various floors of Hogwarts Castle. Hagrid had already bought quite a few roosters, which George could then use to deal with the basilisk. The basilisk's only weakness was the roosters crowing. With their help, killing it wouldn't be so difficult. "You three go back to the common room first. We'll talk about everything after we've killed the basilisk," Professor McGonagall told Ginny, Hermione, and Ron, before jumping down the pipe with the other professors. George nodded to the three of them, spread his wings, and flew directly from the third floor to the Great Hall. Amidst the gasps of the young wizards below, who were being gathered by the prefects to return to the common room, he quickly flew out of the castle. "Hagrid, we've found the basilisk. Where are the roosters? The professors need them." George landed at the door of Hagrid's hut and asked Hagrid, who was preparing chicken feed. Hagrid immediately jumped up and rushed into the hut, nearly kicking the large dog-toothed creature lying next to him in his haste. "They're all in this box." A moment later, Hagrid produced a box containing over 100 roosters. The box in Hagrid's hand was enchanted with a seamless stretch charm. It could easily hold hundreds, even thousands, of roosters. However, this wasn't Hagrid's unauthorized modification, it was a gift from the Ministry of Magic. Although the Ministry of Magic had temporarily suspended Dumbledore due to Malfoy's actions, they weren't entirely indifferent to the students' safety. Knowing the monster in the Chamber of Secrets was a basilisk, they specifically approved the use of this box to hold the roosters. So many. The basilisk must be thrilled. George, seeing the number of roosters in the box, silently mourned for the basilisk. Even a 1,000-year-old basilisk would probably be scared to death this time. It would have been better if it had died by Harry's sword in the original story. Picking up the box, George flapped his wings and quickly returned to the third floor of the castle. However, none of Ron, Hermione, and Ginny obeyed and returned to the common room. They were all still anxiously waiting at the entrance of the tunnel. They were truly Gryffindors. "I'm going down. Don't worry, it should be resolved soon." Holding a box containing 100 large roosters, George greeted the three children and jumped into the tunnel, sliding down to the bottom. The bottom of the tunnel was a tunnel. After walking along the tunnel for a while, passing a basilisk's enormous shed skin, he finally saw Professor Snape and the others again. "These are the roosters Hagrid prepared." George handed the box to Snape, who glanced at it and said to Harry, "Potter, let's begin." "George, after Harry opens the door, you take him far back and don't look this way," McGonagall instructed George with some concern. Harry muttered under his breath, "I'm a year older than George and a year ahead of him, but you're not as good as him." "Begin, you fool." "This isn't the time for jealousy," Snape, standing next to Harry, commanded mercilessly. "I'm not jealous," Harry retorted angrily, but still obediently addressed the two intertwined stone snake carvings on the wall in Parseltongue. "Open." The emeralds in the snake's eyes glowed with green magic, and the wall immediately cracked open, revealing a dimly lit room. The room was surprisingly large and at least 3 stories high, filled with massive pillars adorned with snake carvings. At the far end of the pillars stood a colossal stone statue of Slytherin, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts. "George, take him back." Snape pulled Harry behind him the moment the wall opened and then spoke to George. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123, The Professor's Strength. "Harry, let's step back." George didn't go in with the professors, but obediently led Harry away from the door. At this moment, all they had to do was wait quietly for the outcome. A moment later, a chaotic commotion erupted from a room in the distance, the crowing of a rooster, the terrified hiss of a basilisk, and the sounds of professors casting spells. "Close your eyes." Sleight of hand, thunderbolt, super armor. The eye curse will seal the basilisk's strongest ability. The explosion charm will blast it away. Sleight of hand will finish it off, and the super armor charm will protect everyone from a basilisk counterattack. Even without the rooster, this basilisk probably wouldn't be a match for the professors. George listened to the commotion in the room, inwardly marveling. Aside from a mediocre student like Lockhart, the wizards in Hogwarts teaching staff were among the best in the entire wizarding world. Even Sybil Trelawney, the divination professor who was mostly eccentric and only taught nonsensical lessons, was the great-granddaughter of the true prophet, Cassandra Trelawney. Once the commotion in the room subsided, George led Harry over. The basilisk's enormous serpentine body lay broken on the ground, clearly dead beyond any doubt. The professors, unharmed, were using magic to collect the scattered roosters and put them back into a box. "Dean, I'm very interested in magical creatures, and I've been learning about them from Hagrid lately. Could I collect a few of its fangs as souvenirs?" Seeing that the matter was settled, George's eyes lit up as he asked Snape. The basilisk's fangs were rare items capable of destroying Voldemort's Horcruxes. A few would be useful in the future. "We were able to deal with the basilisk so easily this time, thanks to the roosters you brought. The basilisk's fangs are poisonous, so be careful," Snape agreed without hesitation. George immediately stepped forward and pulled out several of the basilisk's fangs, placing them in the box containing the rooster. With the basilisk defeated, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. However, just as they turned to leave the room, Lockhart, walking at the back, quietly drew his wand. He had been terrified while fighting the basilisk, cowering in a corner. If these professors left, everything he had built would be destroyed, and he would be seen as the biggest fraudster. Therefore, he planned to use a mass-forgetting spell to erase their memories while they were off guard, changing their recollections to that he alone had defeated the basilisk and saved Hogwarts. "Professor Lockhart, what are you doing?" "Disarm him." George, who had been watching Lockhart's actions, saw Lockhart draw his wand to attack all the professors and immediately cast a disarming spell, successfully knocking Lockhart away and disarming his wand. "George, what's going on?" McGonagall and the other professors looked on in confusion. George pointed at Lockhart and replied, "I just saw Professor Lockhart walking at the back, trying to cast a spell on all the professors." "No, I didn't do that." "George, how could you attack a teacher?" Lockhart quickly denied it after standing up, while Snape went straight to Lockhart's side. "Legions." He certainly trusted George more than Lockhart. After a moment, he said with a grim expression, "This guy wanted to cast a forgetfulness charm on us, then claim credit for defeating the basilisk. Just like he did before when he wrote the stories of other wizards into a book and then cast forgetfulness charms on them. That liar." "I knew he was a liar." The professors, hearing Snape's words, immediately pointed at Lockhart and began to curse. Lockhart, regaining his composure, still retorted, "You can't slander me just because you're jealous of me. I didn't do that." Immediately restrain him. Snape pointed his wand at Lockhart, and a rope appeared out of thin air, binding Lockhart tightly like a snake. "You can wait and say those things to the Aurors at the Ministry of Magic. If they don't admit it, then I'll kindly offer them a few drops of truth potion. Sorry, Lockhart, although you've given me a lot of notes, I can't let you erase my memory," George thought to himself, seeing Lockhart's despair. Actually, if Lockhart hadn't ultimately decided to erase everyone's memories, he wouldn't have bothered with him, considering how many notes Lockhart often gave him. How many wizards' memories Lockhart erased and used their experiences to publish novels was none of his business. Keeping Lockhart around meant he could continue using notes to access the Forbidden Library. Unfortunately, Lockhart insisted on erasing everyone's memories, including his own, so he couldn't just let it go. Fortunately, he had already copied most of the valuable material in the Forbidden Library, so not going there again wouldn't be a big problem. In the afternoon, because the Chamber of Secrets was discovered and the basilisk was killed, Dumbledore naturally returned to school. Upon returning to school, Dumbledore immediately summoned George, Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Ginny to the headmaster's office for a detailed interrogation. George, naturally, told the truth and concealed what he should and shouldn't. In truth, aside from encouraging Ginny to tell the truth and helping transport the rooster, he hadn't been overtly involved, and wasn't questioned much. The main focus of his questioning was on Harry and Ginny. He inquired meticulously about the details of the night Ginny's diary was stolen, clearly indicating that Dumbledore didn't want Voldemort's diary to remain undiscovered. However, he didn't extract any clues. Crucially, Ginny, for some reason, didn't mention that she had placed a butterfly bookmark in the diary. George thought she might have forgotten this small detail. Even if Ginny had mentioned it, it wouldn't have mattered. Who would have thought he could locate the bookmark using magnetism? Magnetics are a superpower, like scientific powers, not part of the wizarding system. Unless Dumbledore used the time turner, he wouldn't see any flaws, and now more than 5 hours had passed. Besides, if it weren't for his encouragement, Ginny might not have had the courage to confess everything. He was the hero of this whole affair. After the questioning, George returned to his dormitory without incident, and he had little interest in knowing about Dumbledore's private conversation with Harry afterwards. That evening, a notice was posted on the school bulletin board announcing that the basilisk had been killed by a professor, and the students were overjoyed. Afterwards, classes resumed as normal, Quidditch matches continued as scheduled, and the final exams, which were scheduled for more than 2 weeks later, also began as planned, without the good news of the cancellation of the final exams as described in the original stories. Chapter 124 Deception and Counter-Deception. The following Saturday, George went to the Forbidden Forest alone. Sensing the presence of no other wizards, he took Voldemort's diary from his special storage for the first time. He then took out a quill and began writing. "Hello, I am George." The ink was quickly absorbed by the diary, pausing for about 20 seconds before new text appeared. "Hello, George, my name is Tom Riddle. How did you find my diary?" The 16-year-old Voldemort's soul was bewildered. He was clearly in Ginny's hands. If Ginny opened the diary and wrote a few more times, he could completely use dark magic to seize Ginny's body and resurrect. How did it end up in George's hands again? George had heard Ginny mention him. He was a new Slytherin student this year, excellent in every way, and well liked by all his teachers, much like George himself back then. "I know you, the infamous Voldemort. I stole you from Ginny," George calmly replied in the diary. This time, the diary paused for an even longer period, a full 30 seconds before new text appeared. "How did you know I was Voldemort? I frequent the library, especially the Forbidden section. I saw Voldemort's name in a book, Tom Riddle, and he attended Hogwarts. Since you know I'm Voldemort, why didn't you hand me over to Dumbledore?" "Because I crave power. I want to be like you, the most powerful wizard in the wizarding world, so no one will dare look down on me anymore. It seems we're quite alike. I can give you power, but you must return me to Ginny first." Today, Ginny told all the professors at the school, and they worked together to have Harry use Parseltongue to open the Chamber of Secrets and kill the basilisk. "So Ginny is useless to you now. If you're willing to teach me magic, there are some things I can do for you." The diary remained silent for a full minute before displaying new text. "What magic do you want to learn?" 16-year-old Voldemort never expected that his long-planned scheme, which even led to Dumbledore's reassignment, would end in this unexpected turn of events. With a basilisk killed and Ginny having told the school everything, he couldn't return to her. Going back would likely result in him being sent to Dumbledore immediately. Now, it seemed the only option was to change tactics and deceive this young man. This boy clearly had better magical talent and was more ambitious and driven, unwilling to hand him over to Dumbledore even knowing his true identity. Gaining his trust and possessing his body might be better than possessing Ginny. I secretly learned the 3 unforgivable curses and the fiend fire from the Forbidden Library, but my progress is slow. I'd like to ask you for guidance, George stated directly. He knew Voldemort's alter ego was probably trying to deceive him, but he was also deceiving Voldemort's alter ego. He couldn't possibly trust Voldemort's alter ego, and while writing in the diary, he was fully mentally protected, with light purification magic ready at any moment, ensuring Voldemort wouldn't have any opportunity. Even Ginny Voldemort took a year to completely control him, so controlling him was simply impossible. Once he'd exhausted the 16-year-old Voldemort in these few months, a single basilisk fang would be enough to send him to his grave. He probably wouldn't even be able to wait until the start of his 2nd year. Of course, no problem. I can guide you in learning these spells and make you as powerful as me. The 16-year-old Voldemort's split soul readily agreed. To possess George's body, he needed to gain George's complete trust. Moreover, in his view, George dared to steal these dark magic spells from the Forbidden Library, clearly aiming to become a dark wizard, and definitely wouldn't join Dumbledore's camp. With a little guidance later, he might soon be conquered, becoming his loyal Death Eater, and allowing him to possess the body and resurrect himself. As expected of the famous Voldemort, as long as you teach me these spells, I will definitely repay you handsomely, George immediately offered a grand promise. Voldemort also threw back a carrot, as long as you listen to me, learn according to my teachings, and trust me, you will become the strongest wizard in the wizarding world, surpassing me and Dumbledore. Great. Let's begin now. George's eyes flashed, and he quickly wrote with his quill, getting down to business. So, in the days that followed, in addition to his regular classes, George also secretly went to the Forbidden Forest to learn dark magic from Voldemort. And you know what? Voldemort truly lived up to his title of Dark Lord. Even with only a 16-year-old soul, George's dark magic level improved rapidly under his guidance. However, what the 16-year-old Voldemort didn't know was that the faster he taught, the faster his death would come. At the same time, near the Marvel Cinematic Universe's mutant school, a distinguished guest arrived today. Strange, why isn't anyone here? Black Widow, dressed in sportswear, finally sensed something was amiss after running past a mutant school's gate for the 4th time. After Director Nick Fury assigned her the task of investigating George and the mutants, she had been searching for their hideout. After a considerable period of investigation, including reviewing surveillance satellites, she finally pinpointed the former mutant school. Based on the data, she felt that the former mutant school, both rationally and emotionally, seemed ideal for George to hide with the mutant children for an extended period. Furthermore, satellite and surveillance footage had repeatedly captured George and Wolverine's faces near the mutant school. However, when she came to investigate today, she couldn't find the castle of the mutant school, which was clearly marked on the map. It was as if the school had vanished into thin air. This only confirms my judgment. The fact that she couldn't find the school after passing by 4 times was probably only possible due to the mutants' incredible superpowers. This also proved that her previous judgment was correct. A little troublesome, but not too bad, Black Widow didn't continue wandering around the area and retreated. As the world's largest organization, SHIELD possesses the world's most advanced technology and has extensive experience dealing with various superpowered individuals, so they can always find a way to break through this kind of concealment. Therefore, she now needs to go to the New York branch to transfer some technology team agents to help. However, what she doesn't know is that right inside the school gate, George is watching her pass by again in her sportswear with great interest. Chapter 125 The Black Widow invades the school. They found this place so quickly. Looks like my Oblivion curse has been broken. SHIELD does have some skills. After recognizing Black Widow, George roughly guessed what was going on. He had just been practicing the killing curse in the simulation room when Professor X suddenly came over to tell him that he seemed to have spotted an agent loitering near the school. So he ran over to check it out. And there she was, Black Widow, the one who had been subjected to the Oblivion curse at the Arclay genetics base. Although Professor X had dropped from a level 4 mutant to level 3, his experience was still considerable, and his psychic abilities could cover the entire school, essentially acting as a large-scale radar. Therefore, Professor X could detect anyone with ulterior motives immediately. Want to play? Fine, I'll play with you. They weren't like they were last year when they had just escaped from the base. Even with the infamous SHIELD, George wasn't particularly afraid. If they really provoked him, he could simply use the unseen extension curse box to take everyone away and then storm SHIELD headquarters and cause a ruckus. The current SHIELD didn't have many capable fighters. Or they could throw out the Hydra bomb and let them fight amongst themselves. Besides, after a year of training, the mutant children, including Little Wolf Girl, are basically able to use their abilities to fight quite well. Even without his intervention, the children, working together, are not easily handled by ordinary people. What's next? Should we move them? Professor X turned to George and asked. Before George could answer, Wolverine brandished his claws. Move them? If they dare touch a hair on these children's heads, I'll bury them all in the garden to grow flowers. Professor X's thinking was to avoid conflict with the government if possible, otherwise, exposure would lead to endless pursuit and attacks. Wolverine, however, didn't think that far ahead, and his attitude was even tougher. No need to move them. Let's play with them for a bit first, then we'll have a proper talk. George turned to the student standing behind him and said, we've been practicing combat in the simulation training room before, so today we'll have a real battle. If you do well in this battle, I'll grant you a day off in a few days, and the two professors will take you to the amusement park. Principal, is what you're saying true? Rick, the oldest and most composed student, asked excitedly. Because Professor X resolutely refused to become the principal of the new school, George was currently the principal, even though he didn't teach anything and spent his days researching magic in the basement. Of course, when has the principal ever lied to you? George smiled. Great. Long live the principal. The mutant students immediately cheered happily. After a year of education, they were no longer children who knew nothing. They knew what an amusement park was, that they often saw it on TV, and that they dreamed of going there. However, having experienced cruel experiments, they knew that their current life was hard-won, and since they couldn't leave the school, they were all sensible enough not to mention it. George, isn't this a bit risky? Professor X asked, a hint of worry in his eyes. He wasn't worried about the children's fighting ability, he trusted their skills, and with them watching over them, there wouldn't be any danger. His concern was about George's promise to take the children to the amusement park. Going to an amusement park so openly would attract the government's attention, and it could also alert other organizations to their existence. It's fine. In a few days, SHIELD and the government shouldn't bother us anymore, they're probably too busy dealing with their own problems. George waved his hand dismissively. He felt it was time to reclaim all of the professor's assets and get the government to drop the warrant for his arrest. An hour later, a black van pulled up on the side of the road, 500 meters from the school. Inside, several agents wearing glasses and SHIELD uniforms were fiddling with complex equipment. Black Widow, meanwhile, was using binoculars to survey the area in the direction of the school. So, did you detect anything amiss? We detected a strange magnetic field surrounding the area about 500 meters ahead. This magnetic field is likely disrupting our brains, preventing us from seeing the school. One of the bespectacled men, after some adjustments, turned the monitor towards Black Widow. Look, according to our instruments, the school is indeed still there, and we've also detected a significant amount of life force within the magnetic field. This should be where those mutants are hiding. Is there any way to break through this and see the school again? Black Widow asked, frowning. She was certain the school wouldn't disappear, but how could she enter without being affected? The bespectacled man adjusted his glasses. That's not difficult. Once we get back, we can make some instruments to interfere with the magnetic field. Then you can wear them and see the school normally without being affected. Okay, then hurry back and make some. Make as many as you can. I'll go ask the director for instructions on the next steps. Black Widow nodded, then had the driver take the car back to base. As dusk settled and darkness fell, Black Widow, leading 3 teams of the most elite SHIELD agents, appeared in the woods across the street from the school gate. I'll go in first. Don't move, wait for my signal. Understood. These combat elites from the SHIELD Academy nodded in unison. Black Widow, clad in a black, form-fitting combat suit and equipped with a special magnetic field jamming device, crossed the street at lightning speed and rushed towards the school wall. Through the device, she could clearly see the school across the street. With her skills, scaling the wall and infiltrating the school would be child's play. Ouch! Just as she grabbed onto the wall, trying to use it for leverage to climb over, her face seemed to suddenly slam into an invisible wall, bouncing back and slamming to the ground. "Natasha, are you alright?" Concerned voices from the woods behind her came through her earpiece. Natasha gasped, clutching her nose, and stood up despite the pain, replying, "It's alright, don't move." She cautiously clung to the wall again, reaching out to feel around, only to find no wall ahead, a look of confusion crossing her face. However, she didn't give up because of this initial mishap and climbed over the wall into the school without hesitation. But as soon as she entered, a figure blocked her way. "I wonder what brings this beautiful lady here so late." It was none other than George, likely a typo or something. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.